Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I hope we're all having a great day. Well, it is going to be an eventful day on The Cult. The Cult is a show that I do on Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 5 p.m. on my main channel. And then on Saturdays, we go live at 6 p.m. because we do it a little bit later on Saturdays. Just as that's the way it goes. But we do watch socialism on Saturdays. So that hopefully makes up for it. And this is a show where I cover all different aspects of the culture war. And to be really clear about my allegiances, and I think I'm about to make it very clear in the first segment that we're going to do today, I think that the left and the right are both equally insane. I don't think that I was a Democrat for 20 years. I left the left when I saw them engaging in cancel culture over and over and over and over and over again. They almost destroyed my knitting community over it. They kind of did destroy my knitting community over it, in fact. So I left the left about 3 years ago now. But that doesn't mean that I think the right are any better. In fact, I think that the right have descended into the same type of insanity that captured the Democratic Party and the left a while ago. Now, they do it in different ways than the left does it, but I don't think that one side is better than the other. I don't think we're in a battle of Democrat versus Republican, of progressive versus conservative, of left versus right. I think we're in a battle of authoritarianism versus libertarianism. And the fact of the matter is that both sides are fully capable of being authoritarian. And we're going to talk about one of the ways that the political right is authoritarian today on the show. We are going to be starting off with Disney is suing Ron DeSantis. And I think Disney's going to win. And I have been trying to explain this to conservatives ever since Ron DeSantis started in on this targeted campaign against Disney. I have been trying to explain to conservatives that Ron DeSantis, who is the governor of Florida, a state official, a government official, is using the power of his office and of the state to punish a private business for speech that he doesn't like that was critical of the government. And conservatives can't seem to wrap their heads around this because they really hate Disney. And they think that really hating Disney, even though they won't cancel their Disney Plus and they won't stop bringing their kids to the theme parks, but they really think that really hating Disney is enough to make it acceptable for the governor of a state to use the power of the government to punish a private business for words that they don't like. And then they'll say, but Disney has special privileges. But what they don't understand is that that doesn't actually matter. That is not the argument that's being made. That's never been the argument that's being made. And Disney is about to find that out. And we're going to, not Disney. Disney's going to win this lawsuit, and it's not even going to be close. Ron DeSantis and conservatives are about to find out that their whole, but they had special privileges, but that argument isn't going to work. Because this is, and always has been, a matter of free speech. And whatever way you swing on the political spectrum, if you claim to be anti-authoritarian, then you cannot get behind a government official using the power of the government to punish a private business for speech that the government doesn't like. That is the definition of why we have the First Amendment in the first place. Free speech does apply to businesses. This has already been decided by the Supreme Court. This is no longer up for discussion. Whether or not you like the decision or agree with the decision does not make a difference. It has already been decided. And I said this a year ago and I got dragged all over the internet for it, but right again, Carlin is right, tip jar. You all owe me $2. I told you a year ago that Disney was going to sue Ron DeSantis over this, and Disney was going to win because Ron DeSantis is openly violating the First Amendment. And if we claim to be in favor of free speech, then Ron DeSantis is wrong. Ron DeSantis has always been wrong. There were a million other ways that Ron DeSantis could have handled this. He chose one of the worst possible ways he could have handled it, and it's about to come back to bite him in the ass. Facts don't care about your feelings, conservatives. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to read a little bit of the lawsuit. But the main show today is actually a different conservative that I have an issue with. Now, you will all remember maybe back in February, a couple months ago, Michael Knowles got up at CPAC and, like the true Daily Wire shill that he is, he called for the eradication of transgenderism. Now, this is probably one of the stupidest things that Michael Knowles has ever said in his life, but it did spark a debate among conservatives, which do make conservatives look even more authoritarian than they already looked, about whether or not adults should be allowed to have trans surgery. Now, my position is simple. If you are doing something to your own body as an adult, I don't really care. I don't think kids should be medicalized. I don't think that kids should be put on puberty blockers. I don't think that kids should be put on hormones. I think that they should be allowed to socially transition. I think that they should be allowed to dress however they want. I think they should be allowed to use whatever name that they want. I do not think that kids should be medicalized before they're 18. And quite frankly, I would prefer if people waited until they were 25 to start making decisions that could be permanent medical decisions about cutting off body parts and fertility and stuff like that, simply because your brain does not fully develop the logic reason function of the brain until you are in your mid 20s. And so that would be my preference. But the fact of the matter is we can go die in a war at 18. And so that's just the way it goes. Once you turn 18, it does not matter to me what you do with your body. As long as you're not hurting me, as long as you're not taking my stuff, I don't really care. I think that trans people should be able to live however they want to live. They should be able to have whatever surgery they want to have. And that's just the way it goes. And Michael Knowles disagrees with that, and he wants to eradicate all trans surgery. Now, Brad, who I have been on Brad's show before, Brad is a libertarian. And I'm sorry, I don't remember how to pronounce Brad's last name. It starts with a P, like Palumbo or something like Palermo, something like that. I don't remember exactly what his last name is, but like he's a nice enough guy. He and I also disagree on some things. But like, so basically this is a debate between Michael Knowles, who is taking the conservative position that we should eradicate all transgenderism from all society, which I think is a bit extreme and a bit much. Brad is taking the libertarian position, which is adults should be able to do what they want to do with their own bodies. And they had a little debate over it. And I thought, and this was about a week ago, I haven't actually heard hell or high water about this debate, but I happened to come across it today. And I was like, you know what? I want to hear perhaps Michael Knowles, when he is making a long form argument, will be able to, do a little bit better than we should eradicate all transgenderism off the face of the earth. Maybe he'll have thought more through it. Maybe he will have learned from that gaffe that he made. Maybe he'll present a more coherent argument or acknowledge that it is a little authoritarian for him to be telling adults what to do with their own bodies. But I also want to hear Brad's position, because I actually do agree with Brad on this. I don't agree with him on everything. I do agree with him on this, is that I think that, adults should be able to do what they want, and who the hell is Michael Knowles to tell other people how to live their lives? And so we're going to watch the debate. It's about an hour and a half long, so I'm sure that'll take us about 4.5 hours on the stream. Hopefully not quite that long, but that's what we're doing today on The Cult, guys. We're going to talk about Disney suing Ron DeSantis. We're going to watch this debate between a conservative and a libertarian talking about whether or not transgenderism should be eradicated, and we're going to think about the ideas that they put out there. Now, before we get into these parts of the show, I just want to remind everyone to please mount that like button for me. If you are new to the channel, welcome. I'm really glad you're here. Go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat if you're new to the channel. I do have a moderated chat on this channel, just so you guys know if you're new. The rules are this. Number one, don't be a dick. Don't insult me. Don't insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever I want because this is my house. If you don't like how I behave or how I speak, you're welcome to leave. The door is open. You're always welcome to show yourself out. But as long as you are in my house, you will not insult me and you will not insult other people in the chat. One of the reasons I do this is because I want to create a nice environment in my chat where people can participate and not feel like they're going to see shit posting all of the time. You are welcome to shit post anywhere else you like on the internet. I'm a big fan of shit posting. You just can't do it in my chat when I'm on a live stream. And that's so we can have a conversation and we can have some interaction and we can have some discussion. Keeps it nice for everyone. Number 2 rule in my chat, no whining. I'm 42 years old. I'm old enough to I don't have any children for a reason. I can't deal with whining in my own life. I'm certainly not going to deal with whining on the internet. And so if I ask you to stop doing something, I don't want to hear whining. I don't want to hear complaining. I don't want to hear any of that. I just want you to stop doing the thing that I asked you to stop doing. I don't want to hear, I'm not doing that thing you told me to stop doing, because you are doing the thing I told you to stop doing. If you weren't doing it, I wouldn't have told you to stop doing it in the first place. Just rein it in. That's all I'm asking. Just keep it nice for everyone. We all have to be in the same space for however long we're here together. Let's just, be cordial. That's it. 2 rules. Don't be a dick. No whining. We're going to get along just fine. And a couple other things that I want you guys to know before we get started. Of course, I always want to ask you guys to please make sure you are subscribed to my main Substack, not to be confused with my other 72 Substacks, but at least the main one, which is carlin.substack.com. This is the place where I post all my best Unwoke content, to include another update on gays against groomers. This is like the 6th or 7th article in this series I've written about how gays against groomers is slowly but surely losing all of their volunteers. Now, this was a series that was meant to be 1 article, maybe 2 tops. But Jamie Mitchell, who is the most professional CEO of the Gays Against Groomers, has just kept getting into public feud after public feud after public feud. She's gone after me. She engaged in a smear campaign against me after I wrote the first article about it. And people keep leaving her organization because they don't want to work with her. I can't imagine why. So another person has left Gays Against Groomers. They have blatantly said that Jamie Mitchell is the problem with Gays Against Groomers. Last night, Jamie Mitchell got into a public back and forth with this person on Twitter. This person also got into a fight with the Gays Against Groomers director of communication. And I've got that all documented in the article. This is an organization that is slowly but surely imploding. It was always a branding exercise to begin with. And, per usual, because conservatives make bad choices, they lifted Jamie up because they said, she's gay and she's against grooming. We must give her all our money, even though she didn't actually do anything. Did I spell feuds wrong? I don't even know how to spell feuds today. Whatever. Even though she doesn't actually do anything with the money, all they do is basically merchandise. They make t-shirts and stuff, and that's how they make money. But it is an organization that is a showpiece. That's all it is. And I've been talking about this for a while, and I keep trying to tell people, like, stop supporting these organizations that are nothing more than smoke and mirrors. This is a bad idea. It's a waste of resources. Stop doing it. And you can read about that, and you can read what happened on the Substack. I also got a couple more articles that I'm working on this week, and I do try to present the most unique and bestly curated. Bestly is bestly even a word? Best curated Unwoke content site on the internet. I'm telling you the stories that no one else is telling you. I'm teaching you the stuff that no one else is teaching you, and I'm doing it in plain English to try to break down the woke ideology and try to make the world a little bit of a better place one day at a time. So that's going to be over on carlin.substack.com. I also do want to let people know that if you would like to get email updates about what I'm going to be covering on the show prior to me actually going live on the show, I do have a separate Substack that is just for this show. It's thecult.substack.com. And every day prior to the show, I send out a little email update saying, here's what I'm going to be covering on the show. You get my show notes. I also tell you what are the links for YouTube, Odyssey, Rockfin, and Rumble. And by the way, shout out to everyone watching on Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, Getter, Twitter, all the other places that I'm broadcasting. But I provide you all of the links for the live show. I also give you the show notes. That way, if I'm covering something that you want to learn about, you already know to come watch the show. And if I'm not covering something you want to learn about, you don't have to watch me. You can go watch something else. So if you want to get signed up for that, it is thecult.substack.com. And really the only thing that I send out from this are the show announcements and the show notes. I also am creating a video archive of the show just in case, something ever happens to YouTube. I got a couple episodes I need to upload, but you can see full episodes, and you can also subscribe to the audio only podcast. It's available in Substack. It's available on Apple. It's available on Spotify. And this is where I'm posting the audio segments of the show, just basically a new episode with each segment. So I'm breaking them down. And again, you can listen to the stuff you want to listen to. You can ignore the stuff you want to ignore. I do a little bit of something for everyone. So if you want to subscribe, you can do that on all the major podcasting platforms now. And you can find links at thecult.substack.com. Let me see. Starry IZ, I saw a clip of you and Shannon Bream trending on Reddit. Oh, yes. This is the clip that for over 2 years, conservatives, not leftists, conservatives have been cutting out of context to smear me. This clip goes viral every month or two. And all of a sudden, I get a lot of emails in my inbox harassing me because they've cut it out of context. I also get a lot of notes like this saying, Carlin, did you know that clip of you is going viral again? Yes, I did know that's going viral again because conservatives just can't help themselves but to smear people who have tried to help them. This has been going on for 2 straight years. It will never stop. It is one of the best indicators I have that conservatives really don't care about the truth at all, because not a single person who has ever shared that clip has actually bothered to fact check it And then I end up getting harassed endlessly and get all these emails from, I mean, I'm sorry, the most batshit stupid people on the face of the earth, complaining about what I said in the clip. And I say, huh, that's funny. Did you watch the full clip? And they're like, we don't care what the full clip says. That's what they say every single time. I'm not even joking about that. So that clip going viral is really the best indication that you guys had that conservatives don't care about the truth any more than leftists care about the truth. And that is why the cult exists, because we're not buying into the bullshit on either side. And they can all go F themselves, so far as I'm concerned. All right, guys, one more thing before we jump into our content for today. I know you watched the full clip, Starry. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the morons that share that clip, not about you. A couple programming notes. Number one, of course, on Fridays at 5 p.m., we do happy hour on this channel. Happy hour is a stream where we watch a woke training from start to finish and we talk about it. And this week on Friday at 5 p.m., we are watching a series called White and Woke at Work. And this is going to be a woke training series. And the reason that I picked this series out is I recently on my Substack discovered the best social justice warrior on all of Substack. No, Brandon Tatum did not apologize for the clip. Brandon Tatum did not apologize. We need to clear this up right now. What Brandon Tatum says is, I'm sorry if your feelings got hurt that I shared this clip out of context, but can you really blame me because you have stupid hair? Brandon Tatum did not apologize. In fact, Brandon Tatum and his wife were complete. What happened is 2 years ago, one of the conservatives who did not bother to fact check that clip was Brandon Tatum. And he did this whole video about what an awful person I am and how my parents should be put in jail for having me. And then I called his ass out and I said, did you even bother to watch the full clip, asshole? Because it's available on the internet. And then Brandon Tatum and his wife complained about the fact that I called them out. Brandon Tatum took a full day and a half before he pulled that video down where he blatantly lied about me. And then he and his wife complained that, oh, well, she had the nerve. She swore when she called us out. And then he posted a video saying, you know, I'm just really, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you feel bad about this, but can you really blame me? Have you seen your hair? Like, that was basically what he said. So Brandon Tatum can go fuck himself. He's just as bad as Candace Owens, so far as I'm concerned. And he absolutely did not apologize. Anyway, the reason that we are watching White and Woke at Work is because it features our friend Chandra. Yes, Chandra. Chandra is the worst SJW on all of Substack. She has this woman in the course of like a couple of weeks on Substack Notes has achieved absolutely like mythic proportions in the amount of crazy, I mean, batshit insane woke things that she says. If you want a little preview of what you can expect from Chandra, I actually thought that Chandra was a parody account when I first started seeing her show up on Substack Notes. And if you want a little preview of that, I wrote a whole article about it because I was so perturbed. I was like, I had to do an investigation to make sure that Chandra was a real person. And as I was doing this investigation, I happened to find that Chandra was in this series called White and Woke at Work. And I was like, oh, well, that's good happy hour material, isn't it? So we're gonna watch Chandra, and we're not even gonna just watch Chandra. There are other interviews too. They're short. They're like half an hour, 40 minutes long, so much shorter than our usual happy hour videos. So we can watch a couple of those to just get a sense of this, what it means to be white and woke at work. I think that's gonna be really fun. And then on Saturday, guys, something very exciting is about to happen in the land of socialism. Are you guys ready? So, one of the YouTube channels that I get a fair bit of socialist content from that is extremely socialist is a YouTube channel called Red May. Now, Red May is an organization in Seattle where every May they do a whole series of hyper uber socialist presentations. And guess what, guys? It's almost May. It's going to be May. We are about to enter Red May in the land of socialism, which means that the Red May YouTube channel is spinning back up again. It's turning on, and we're going to be doing a lot of socialist content in May because Red May is about to deliver to us on a silver platter everything that is beautiful and glorious and dystopian about the land of socialists. And so I thought that we would kick off a little early Red May by watching a video from Red May last year in which they were discussing the George Floyd rebellion. That's what they're calling it, the George Floyd rebellion of 2020. So we've got a 2-hour video of socialists discussing the George Floyd rebellion that we're going to be watching on Socialism Saturday this week. It is Saturdays at 6 p.m. These are real socialists. These are the real deal, the farthest left of the far left. It's going to be fascinating to hear their perspective on the George Floyd rebellion. Rex says the crazy thing about it that after me watching you, Carlin, for about a week, YouTube algorithm puts a suggestion of a video that mocks me. So there are a lot of videos on YouTube that mock me for various things. I don't ever watch them, to be honest. Most of the time, yes, Bree, I promise, Bree, I promise. We'll get back to West Wing. I promise. I swear to God. I swear. We're going to do it. I swear. Bree's the best. She has the best patience of anyone. So the thing about videos mocking me on YouTube is they're most often created by just horrible, I mean idiotic, like bottom of the barrel content creators that are mostly like the dumbest people on the planet. A lot of them are also really jealous that my YouTube channel back in 2020 grew really quickly and really big. And you know, I mean they're jealous. Like, I mean, let's just do brass tacks. They're fucking jealous that I grew the platform a lot easier than a lot of them, that my content is more intelligent than a lot of them. And it's just like, so they make these videos mocking me and they find clips out of context and they lie about me. The amount of lies that have been told about me on the internet by these, quite frankly, awful actual grifters is next level, guys. Next level. So watch what you want, but you know, just keep in mind that if you're watching content about me, they're probably lying assholes, and you are welcome to ask me any questions you like. I'm pretty much an open book. I have no problem answering questions. But if that's the type of content you enjoy, more power to you. I don't really know what to say. Don't know what to say. All right, guys, let's jump back and we are going to get into the discussion about Disney suing Ron DeSantis. So like I said at the opening, I told you guys this was going to happen. I told you guys as soon as Ron DeSantis started this little campaign of trying to take Disney's Reedy Creek privileges away from them, which by the way, that's not even a conservative thing to do. If conservatives really want smaller government, then what Disney had in place should have been extended as an option to all businesses in Florida. The government should not be in the business of taking away freedom. If the government is in the business of taking away freedom, that leads to a more authoritarian government. Ron DeSantis going after Disney's so-called special privileges, which, by the way, were granted to Disney because Disney is almost 100% responsible for developing Florida economically. Disney basically showed up in Florida, like back before Disney World was a thing, and there was a lot of field and grass and swamp, and there was no development. Disney is almost single-handedly responsible for all of the tourism in Florida. That's why they were granted the so-called special privileges in the first place. But if Ron DeSantis had actually wanted to act in a conservative manner, what he would have said is all businesses in Florida have the option of getting these so-called special privileges. He would have granted more freedom, not taken freedom away. So Ron DeSantis' position wasn't even a conservative position. But that's not actually what I'm most concerned about. What I said from the very beginning is that Ron DeSantis was running around and doing fundraisers, bragging about the fact that he was using the power of state government to punish a private business for speech that is critical of the government. Julie pays up. Carlin is right. Tip jar, just for people who are new on my channel. Every time I'm right and you're wrong about something and I get proven right and you are ultimately proven wrong, you owe me $2. It is an honor system. You don't always have to pay up, but I appreciate what you guys do. Thank you, Julie, for the super chat. So Ron DeSantis was deliberately going, and let's just play a little game of fantasy here for a second. Let's imagine a reality in which a Democrat governor, let's hypothesize that Tennessee had a Democrat governor. Okay. Now I don't know if I don't know who the governor of Tennessee is off the top of my head, so I don't know if this would actually happen. We're doing a thought experiment. What if Tennessee, with a Democrat governor, decided to openly attack the Daily Wire, which is located in Nashville, for speech that they didn't like? If a Democrat governor went after a conservative business in the same way that Ron DeSantis has gone after Disney, conservatives would lose their effing minds. They would lose their minds. Now, guys, principles only matter when you follow them when they are inconvenient. If it is wrong for a Democrat governor to use the power of the state to attack a conservative business over speech that is critical of the Democrat governor, then it is also wrong for a Republican governor to use the power of the state to attack a liberal business for speech that they don't like that is critical of the government. I mean, it's really that simple. And that is exactly and precisely what happened in this scenario. And you don't have to like Disney. If you don't like Disney, I would recommend canceling your Disney Plus subscriptions. And I would recommend not taking your kids to Disney theme parks. I would recommend boycotting Disney, not engaging in commerce with Disney. I think that that's an appropriate way to handle it. But what is not appropriate is for an elected government official to purposefully go after a private company for speech that is critical of the elected government official. This is openly and blatantly against the First Amendment. This is basic. Basic. And so if we aren't going to follow our own principles, then I really don't know what the point of any of this is. So let's read. This is an article in The Hill. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how Fox News covered this, because Fox News is already lying to their audience about this. Bree says a lot of conservatives are boycotting Disney. I don't think that's true, Bree. I think a lot of conservatives initially boycotted Disney. And then what I heard from a lot of conservatives is, well, my kids really like the movies on Disney Plus, and so I guess I have to subscribe to Disney Plus again because my kids really like the movies, but it'll be okay because Ron DeSantis is going to punish them. That's what I heard. I've also heard from people saying, my kids really like the rides at Disney World, so I guess I just have to take them to Disney World, even though I don't like them. That's honest to God what I've heard from conservatives. They are expecting Ron DeSantis to do what they are unwilling to do themselves, and that's the problem. But let's take a read of this article. Disney sues DeSantis, alleging harm to its business. The Walt Disney Company is suing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and other state officials, alleging that Ron DeSantis is harming the company's business operations. The lawsuit comes months after months of Disney and DeSantis sparring over legislation that DeSantis has signed and steps the governor has taken to increase the state's control over Disney. A targeted campaign of government retaliation orchestrated at every step by Governor DeSantis as punishment for Disney's protected speech now threatens Disney's business operations, jeopardizes its economic future in the region, and violates its constitutional rights. And Disney is correct about that. The lawsuit comes after the board that DeSantis appointed to oversee Disney voted Wednesday to void development contracts that Disney has made. Disney said in the complaint that the action from the board was the latest strike leading to the lawsuit. And guys, I've read a little bit of this lawsuit. Disney is really heavily discussing the free speech implications. Let me just see if I can get this to pop up in a different window. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Maybe download. I don't know how to do that. Boom. Actually, maybe we can look at it on the Fox News website. The Fox News website was a little bit easier to read. So, how The Hill is covering this is correct. The Hill is covering this saying that Disney is suing Ron DeSantis because they're alleging that Ron DeSantis violated Disney's free speech, which is true. Let me show you how Fox News is covering it. Fox News, I decided to load a bunch of ads onto my browser, even though it shouldn't be doing that. How Fox News is covering this is Disney sues Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over loss of the special district. No, that's not what they're suing them over. Fox News is lying to their audience because, see, and this is the type of bullshit question that I get from conservatives. So you're telling me that you support evil? No. That's not what's being said. Try to focus. What I do not support is the government retaliating against a private business over free speech. If you support, Joseph, the government retaliating against a private business for speech critical of the government, then you are an authoritarian that does not believe in individual liberties or the First Amendment. This makes no difference at all. This makes no difference at all. This is what and this is why I'm pissed off that Fox News is lying to conservatives. This quite literally makes no difference at all when it comes to the merits of the lawsuit that Disney has. Listen, man. No, this is another excuse. It wasn't, they didn't make speech critical of the government. It was critical of the voters. No. Wrong. No, that's not how it works. Listen, I really need all conservatives that are listening right now to focus. This is a free speech issue. Whether or not Disney runs their own fire station and police department does not matter. Disney is allowed, per the Supreme Court, to disagree with laws that have been passed by the government. Disney is allowed. No, I'm not missing this, Michael. You're just too stupid to understand what I'm saying. Mouth shut, ears open. Disney is allowed to say that they don't like laws that the government in Florida passes. This is not an attack on voters. This is speech that is critical of the government. Disney is allowed to make that speech. Disney is allowed, per the First Amendment, to lobby against those laws. what Ron DeSantis is not allowed to do. Michael, I've already said, mouth shut, ears open. If you do it again, I'm going to block you because I don't have any time for this stupid conservative fucking bullshit. What Disney is not allowed to do is retaliate, or excuse me, what Ron DeSantis is not allowed to do, not Disney, what Ron DeSantis is not allowed to do is openly retaliate against a specific company for speech that is critical of Ron DeSantis. I truly don't know what is so hard to understand. This lawsuit, unlike what Fox News is saying, has nothing to do with they had special privileges and they were treated differently, and oh my god, we don't like Disney because they have special privileges. You guys never even cared about Disney's special privileges until Disney made speech that you didn't like. Well, as I said, this is my house. I can do whatever I want in my house. No one's forcing you to be here. If you claim to believe in free speech and you claim to believe in individual liberties, then you supporting the government retaliating against a private business for speech that is critical of the government should not be something that you would tolerate. The only reason, conservatives, that you are tolerating it is because the government happens to be run by the guy on your team. If the guy in the governor's chair that was doing this was a Democrat, you would be whining and complaining all over Twitter and everywhere else about how dare you do that? Democrats hate free speech. Democrats hate us. Democrats always want to censor us. That's exactly what you would be doing. The reason that you're not doing that is because you have no principles. I don't know how else to explain this. Fox News is openly lying to its viewers with this headline. This lawsuit is not about the loss of the special district. This lawsuit is about free speech. And Fox News is so blatantly lying to its viewers that it actually even has the lawsuit in the article. And they know that their viewers are not going to read the lawsuit. So let's just read a little bit of it. Let's read a little bit of this lawsuit that Disney has filed against Ron DeSantis, and you're going to see that this is not about the special district, conservatives. This is about free speech. For more than half a century, Disney has made an immeasurable impact on Florida and its economy, establishing Central Florida as the top global tourist destination, attracting millions to the state each year. A targeted campaign of government retaliation, orchestrated at every step by Governor DeSantis as punishment for Disney's protected speech, now threatens Disney's business operations, jeopardizes its economic future in the region, and violates its constitutional right. It's in the second paragraph in the article, conservatives. They're suing over the free speech implications. That's what they're suing over. That's what the argument is. And they are 100% going to win. Today's action is the latest strike. At the governor's bidding, the state's oversight board has purported to void publicly noticed and duly agreed development contracts, which had laid the foundation for billions of Disney's investment dollars and thousands of jobs. The government action was patently retaliatory, and they are absolutely going to be able to prove that because Ron DeSantis used this to fundraise. patently anti-business, and patently unconstitutional. But the governor and his allies have made clear they do not care and will not stop. The governor recently declared that his team would not only void the development agreement, just as they did today, but also plan to look at things like taxes on hotels, tolls on roads, developing some of the property that the district owns with more amusement parks, and even putting a state prison next to Walt Disney World. Ron DeSantis is in an open campaign of retaliating publicly against Disney for speech that Ron DeSantis didn't like. And he's not even trying to hide it. Disney regrets that it came to this, but in his exhausted efforts to seek resolution, the company is left with no choice but to file this lawsuit to protect itself. Let's see. Governor DeSantis and his allies paid no mind to the governing structure that facilitated Reedy Creek's successful development until 1 year ago when the governor decided to target Disney. There is no room for disagreement about what happened here. Disney expressed its opinion on state legislation and then was punished by the state for doing so. It's a free speech issue, conservatives. It always has been. Governor DeSantis announced that Disney's statement had crossed the line, a line evidently separating permissible speech from intolerable speech, and launched a barrage of threats against the company in immediate response. Since then, the governor, the state legislator, and the governor's handpicked local government regulators have moved beyond threats to official action, employing the machinery of the state in a coordinated campaign to damage Disney's ability to do business in Florida. State leaders have not been subtle about the reasons for government intervention. And what they mean by that is, again, they have openly bragged about this. It was so stupid of them to do this. If you are going to retaliate against a private company for speech critical of the government, don't go to fundraising dinners and brag about what you're doing to raise money, because you are openly and blatantly violating the First Amendment when you do this. They have proudly declared that Disney deserves this fate because of what Disney said. This is a clear case of retaliation, as this court is ever likely to see. And it goes on and on and on and on and on, discussing how this is a free speech case, not what Fox News is reporting, saying it's over the loss of the special district. No, it's not. That is a lie. No, it's not. That is a lie. Stop saying that. That's why you're going to lose. The fact that conservative influencers have lied to their audience to this extent so that the audience doesn't even understand what's going on, this is why you guys lose. The government openly retaliated against a private business for free speech. They voided their contracts. They went after how the business makes money, and they are openly and deliberately planning additional attacks on the specific business for speech they don't like that is critical of the government. No, this is, guys, this is why I need you to shut your mouths and to listen. No, the entire lawsuit is about free speech. I literally just read you the main crux of the argument. The entire lawsuit is about the governor of Florida engaging in a concerted campaign. We'll sit here all day and do this, guys. The entire lawsuit is about the governor of Florida engaging in a concerted campaign to retaliate against a private business for speech the business expressed that was critical of the government. You know why I'm allowed to block people on my channel? I am not the government. I am not a government official. The state is not allowed to utilize the powers of the government to openly and blatantly retaliate against private businesses because those businesses are critical of the government. This is First Amendment 101. It is government retaliation. Does anyone have questions about this? Exactly. This is exactly right, Ellie. This is exactly right. The law is where the rubber meets the road. Disney can say whatever they want about legislation, and you are personally welcome to disagree, and you are personally welcome to not patronize Disney. But what you cannot do is use the power of the office of the governor to openly retaliate again and use the state to punish the private business for speech critical of the government. And I really do, I wish that your influencers had been more honest with you, because I tried to tell you guys that this was going to happen. I tried to tell you back when this whole thing first started. I did a whole stream on my channel. I even put together a PowerPoint presentation to slowly lay it out for you how this was going to go horribly, 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 horribly wrong for Ron DeSantis. I was attacked up and down by conservatives. Again, shocker. But the fact is that Fox News is lying to you with this headline. And if you read the lawsuit, which is available literally in this article, you're going to see that this is a free speech case. It has always been a free speech case. It will always will be a free speech case. And whatever special privileges Disney has doesn't even make a difference. It really doesn't. It is about the governor of Florida openly retaliating using the power of the government. And if it's not okay for a Democratic governor to do it, it sure shit isn't okay for a Republican governor to do it. So I'm sorry if I'm feeling a little frustrated, but I am very frustrated with your influencers for lying to you so much about this, because it was so clear to me from day one what was going to happen. And now it is. And DeSantis is going to lose. I'm sorry. Like there is no way that DeSantis is not going to lose. There is no way in this universe. I will eat my fucking hat if Ron DeSantis wins this lawsuit. I don't think it's going to happen. So that's what's going on, guys, and that's what it's about. And this is why it is so important that we apply our principles when they are inconvenient as well as when they are convenient. If Ron DeSantis had promoted that maybe people should go to other theme parks in Florida that aren't Disney, okay, he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to have his free speech too. If Ron DeSantis had said, you know what, I'm canceling my Disney Plus subscription and I suggest you do the same, then he's allowed to say that. He is allowed to do that. What he is not allowed to do is use the mechanism of state government to punish a business or a private person for speech he doesn't like that's critical of the government. He's not allowed to do that. Okay? Is everyone clear? We'll see what happens, but I don't think this bodes well for DeSantis, and I don't think it's going to help him in regards to his presidential aspirations in 2024 at all. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. But Nikki Haley is already speaking out. Nikki Haley still running for president, still our favorite go nowhere neocon running for president, and Nikki Haley is saying, Disney, come to South Carolina. We'd love their jobs. Let's hear what Nikki Haley had to say in response to all this bullshit.
I want to ask you about what could be another Republican candidate in the field, and that is Ron DeSantis. We just learned a few moments ago that Disney is now suing the Florida governor for alleging political effort to hurt their business. We've all been watching this back and forth for quite some time. This is obviously dramatically escalating the feud between Disney and Ron DeSantis. They're alleging that the Republican governor has waged a, quote, relentless campaign to weaponize government power over the company. What is your reaction to that, as we still have yet to see him jump officially into the race?
You know, as governor, I took a double-digit unemployment state and I turned it into an economic powerhouse. Businesses were my partners, because if you take care of your businesses, you take care of your economy takes care of the people, and everyone wins. And so that's the way we dealt with it. South Carolina was a very anti-woke state. It still is. And if Disney would like to move their hundreds of thousands of jobs to South Carolina and bring the billions of dollars with them, I'll let them know. I'll be happy to meet them in South Carolina and introduce them to the governor and the legislature that would welcome it.
Well, I don't think Disney's going to do that, Nikki, but I do think that Nikki Haley, listen, man, I want to be very clear about this. I am not a fan of Disney. I'm not a fan of Disney at all. I don't like what Disney's done. I think Disney is woke as shit. Guess what? I don't have Disney Plus in my house. When I actually canceled Disney Plus, because my husband does watch Star Wars and stuff like that, I actually did cancel Disney Plus when conservatives started boycotting Disney Plus, and I didn't sign up again. I don't go to Disney World. I don't do any of that. You know, when I don't like a company, I don't engage with the company. I don't argue that the government should retaliate against the company. And I think that's the way you have to do it. And, you know, I've never bought into this argument of they had special privileges that should have been taken away. No, that is fundamentally creating a more authoritarian government, guys. That's not what I'm about. I hope you guys aren't about that either. Why are you giving the government more power? Because here's the last thing I'm going to say about this Disney stuff. At some point, there will be a Democrat governor in Florida. Ron DeSantis is not going to be governor of Florida forever. And quite frankly, Ron DeSantis has shown a lot of statist tendencies that I'm less than comfortable with. But at some point, there will be a Democrat governor in Florida. And Ron DeSantis has sadly set the precedent that if Disney doesn't win this lawsuit, Ron DeSantis has set the precedent that it is acceptable for the Democrat governor of Florida, who will eventually hold that seat, to retaliate against Republican businesses for saying speech that's critical of the government. Every single principle that you apply to your enemy, you keep in mind it's going to be applied to you. And if you're not comfortable with the outcomes of that, then you need to think about your actions. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think that Ron DeSantis is about to find out that, by the way, guys, Disney has hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. Just for anyone that thinks that Disney is going to go financially insolvent from this, no, they're not. Disney has more than enough money to be able to fight this lawsuit for years and years and years and years, and it will probably end up going to the Supreme Court. And guess what? Then you guys are going to have to deal with those constitutionalists that Trump appointed to the Supreme Court. Neil Gorsuch is going to rule on the side of Disney. Mark my words. Neil Gorsuch will absolutely rule on the side of Disney. I think that Amy Coney Barrett would probably rule on the side of Disney. Disney's going to win. And I guess that's just the way that it's going to go. But guys, let's move into our main event for today. We're already an hour into the show, and we're actually finally getting to the good stuff. I would like to watch this debate between Michael Knowles and Brad Palumbo. There's Brad's name. It's on the thumbnail. I didn't see it earlier. And this is a debate about should transgenderism be regulated. Essentially, this debate took place after Michael Knowles basically went on the stage at CPAC and said, I think that transgenderism should be eradicated from society. A lot of people took offense to that. I took offense to that because I think that adults should be able to do whatever they want with their own body. Now, the key word there is adults. I don't think children should be medicalized because the logic, reason, function of their brain isn't fully developed yet. But adults, yeah, you can do, if you can go and die in a war, then you can do whatever you want to with your own body as long as you're not hurting me or taking my stuff. I don't really care. It makes no difference to me at all. And so I don't care if people are trans. And I think that the argument that conservatives are making about, like, they're trying to outlaw all trans surgery now for all ages. And that doesn't seem wise. It seems a little authoritarian when you are quite literally telling people what they can and cannot do with their own bodies. That seems a little authoritarian. And I don't think it's a good idea. So these two had a debate. This debate was about a week ago. It is on the Intercollegiate Students YouTube page. Not Intercollegiate Students. Intercollegiate Studies Institute. And the only description it has is, should transgenderism be outlawed by law? And I thought we would give this debate a watch. It's about an hour and a half. I have my knitting. I have some drinks. Okay, I only have sparkle water. That's all I have. I have knitting. I have drinks. Go get a snack. Kick up your feet. Mount that like button for me if you would like to watch this debate. And of course, I'll be offering my commentary on the debate as well. And let's see what Michael Knowles has to say. And I really hope that Brad shows up. Listen, man, I don't think Brad gets everything right, but I think he got this right. I remember highlighting his tweet on Twitter when he was like, we shouldn't be telling adults what to do with their own bodies. And so I want to hear how it goes. Let's get this party started. And hopefully there'll be captions. Hopefully there'll even be sound. When does it actually start? Play. This is like a long ass intro.
Of topics.
Yay!
Spencer Foundation for making this event possible. Before we get to the topic at hand, I'd like to tell you briefly about my organization, the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. ISI exists to provide a forum and a community for college students across the country to explore and examine fundamental questions about politics, culture, economics, and history, and debate how to implement those ideas in American life and on their campuses, specifically to ensure that the common good and dignity of every human person is respected. We host about 150 events around the country on a wide range of topics, from lectures, debates, weekend conferences. And this debate series is part of an effort to explore questions, and we've explored a number of topics, from national security, economics, technology, to social issues. And we've actually heard from our students that it's the social issues in particular that they would like more discussion of, more debate, and more clarification. And so we've picked this.
I'm going to put a poll in the chat to see where you guys are at.
And law. And I understand that it's obviously a controversial topic. Over 11,000 students have signed a petition calling for this event to be canceled. But we believe that that's a signal that there's more that needs to be explored on this topic. And it touches a nerve in terms of the life in common here at the Pitt community. It touches a nerve because it's a conversation ultimately about human nature. What does it mean to be a man or a woman according to biology, to culture, to history, and to religion? And how should law and public policy reflect those realities? So tonight we gather at a university, a place of open inquiry and discourse, where we ask tough questions and examine presuppositions to confront a difficult question. And I expect our speakers to do it with patience, intelligence, honesty, and openness in an effort to pursue truth together.
Well, we'll have
to
to
deliberate, which is a hallmark of our democratic life about how to best order our community on this important question. So without further ado, thank you all for coming tonight. And I'd like to welcome Dylan of the College Republicans to introduce our speakers.
Oh, hang on. We got a super chat from Naruto. Naruto, thank you. Maybelline is the latest company to partner with Dylan Mulvaney, and conservatives are predictably up in their feelings and keep... God damn it. God, seriously? Okay, this is the only thing I'm going to say about Dylan Mulvaney. If you don't want Dylan Mulvaney to be famous, you have got to stop talking about Dylan Mulvaney. Conservatives are keeping Dylan Mulvaney in the news cycle. Conservatives are the ones putting money in Dylan Mulvaney's pocket. If conservatives would just get it together and shut the F up about Dylan Mulvaney, I promise you, Dylan Mulvaney would go away. I'm really starting to believe that conservatives can't live without Dylan Mulvaney. You blocked me on Twitter for that because you took offense when I commented or replied. I don't know what you're talking about, Andre, and I don't know what your Twitter account is. So, I mean, if you said something spicy on Twitter, then there is a good chance that I blocked you over it because there's only a certain amount of nonsense that I'm willing to engage in. But if you want me to unblock you on Twitter, send me an email to activelyunwoke@gmail.com. Let me know what your Twitter account is, or you can DM me at the Actively Unwoke account. Let me know what your Twitter account is. I'm going to look and see what you said, but I also recognize you as a regular viewer on my channel. And so I am more inclined to unblock people who are regular viewers on my channel. Really, James, we're going to make the argument that conservatives don't talk about Dylan Mulvaney. Really? I think we can prove that to be false. Very, very easily.
Thank you all for coming. I'm glad you were able
Well,
to
I'm
make
glad
it
you
in
have
here
good
through a
spirits
little bit of
about it.
unanticipated
Let me know what your
crowd there.
Twitter account is and I'll unblock you.
But just a quick reminder to everybody before I introduce the speakers that there's no signs, noisemakers, or disruptions permitted. And any disruptions that impede the ability of everybody in the room to view and engage in a productive conversation will have those items removed. So our first debater, Mr. Michael Knowles, is the celebrated host of The Michael Knowles Show at the Daily Wire and The Book Club at PragerU. He is also the author of the best-selling book, Speechless. In 2017, Michael published the #1 national best-selling treatise, Reasons to Vote for Democrats, which President Donald Trump hailed as a great book for your reading enjoyment. In late 2020, after an appearance guest hosting the Rush Limbaugh program, it was announced that Michael's daily podcast would be syndicated to terrestrial radio. Our second debater, Brad Palumbo, is a libertarian journalist. His work has been cited by top lawmakers such as Senator Rand Paul, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Pat Toomey, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Congressman Thomas Massie, and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, as well as by prominent media personalities such as Sean Hannity, Ben Shapiro, and Mark Levin. Brad has also testified before the U.S. Senate, appeared on Fox News and Fox Business, and written for publications such as USA Today, National Review, Newsweek, and The Daily Beast. He co-hosts the Based Politics podcast and has a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Tonight's debate will be moderated by Leah Sargent, who is the Chief of Staff for Debates and Public Discourse at Braver Angels. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others. She is the author of 2 books and has spoken on building community and constructive conflict around the world. She runs...
Can I just tell you that when you're on this side of things and like, here's the point I want to make. You start to realize what bullshit all these bios are that people write. I mean, it's really just amazing. It's like, I talked to Rand Paul that one time. I'm going to put that in my official bio forever. Or I got a 1-sentence mention in the New York Times. I'm going to put that in my bio forever. It's just like, it is such nonsense and craziness. And like, trust me when I tell you guys, as someone who has had both positive and negative media, like, it's all bullshit. It really is. It is all bullshit. bullshit. It is so much bullshit. I cannot. The best advice that I could ever give to someone who like wants to like, build an audience is you have to focus on just normal people, man, because like you can get a mention here or there, you can get a story written about you, or you can even have a PragerU video. And at the end of the day, it ain't going to amount to anything. You'll get a small like temporary uptick, but it's the people that are there all day, every day that are going to make or break you. And it's not about the media, and the media is like really not as glamorous as it's cracked up to be. All right. That's all I'm saying.
Other Feminisms, a Substack community focused on the dignity of interdependence. So please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Yeah, exactly. I coded a website back in the days of AOL and GeoCities. All the little conservatives are like, "Oh, Michael, no, you're so brave, Michael. You're so beautiful, Michael." Oh, Trans Jesus is here. Hi, Trans Jesus.
Before we begin, I just have to point out this is a very different welcome than we got outside. So I appreciate it.
Thank you all very much for coming. I want to give you a brief introduction to the debate format we'll be using and the goals for our debate. We're going to lead off with opening speeches of 5 minutes from each of our speakers, starting with Mr. Knowles, followed by Mr. Palumbo. They'll each have a 2-minute opportunity to rebut or respond to each other's statements. And then we'll have about 30 minutes of moderated discussion between the two panelists and me. And after that, we'll open it up to questions from the room, and I suppose, if sufficiently aerodynamic, from the outside room as well. I'm Leah Sargent. I work for Braver Angels, facilitating debates on contentious issues across the nation. And what always interests me is when there's a debate where people feel stuck, where there's a question they feel is vitally important, where they've struck out again and again in trying to address it with people they disagree with, or have felt unable to bring it up at all. I think tonight's topic certainly hits that benchmark. But what interests me about
So Mama's saying, I can understand having healthy respect for individuals with integrity and healthy egos, but most of the popular talking heads don't have any of those traits. Brad Palumbo, whose show I was on a while back, and we had a perfectly nice relationship. He unfollowed me on Twitter because I'm a member of the LPNH. Like, don't tell me you believe in free speech, bro. Come on. Don't lie, Brad. Come on. I might agree with some of the things that you say, but
I think it's also two contentious topics wound up together. There's the obvious questions of gender identity and who we are, how we see each other. But then there's the second one, which is how do we live alongside each other in a pluralistic society when we disagree strongly with our neighbor and there isn't an easy compromise? You can't average out the tax rates to decide how you'll live alongside a difference of agreement about gender identity. So I think one thing I'd like everyone to consider in attending is that whether or not you've come into the room with a very strong belief about the question of gender and transgender ideas, you may find yourself agreeing or disagreeing with the speaker you support when it comes to the question of how we navigate those differences in a pluralistic society, when the law should coerce, what we do when we disagree deeply with a friend. And I hope you'll leave this room better prepared to speak to someone who you think is living wrongly, who you love, who you can't walk away from or simply protest, and you want to figure out, how do I say I think you're wrong in a way that they'll hear as an act of love? With no further ado, Mr. Knowles.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. All right. There they are. I didn't know.
Oh.
I thought they might have been stuck outside, but we found them. Was that to them or to me? That was to them. Okay, it's confusing.
they're just gonna shout the whole
All right.
time. Oh my God. Can you shut the door?
That sounds like they've gotten into harmony. It's not even just melody anymore. All right. See, I was under the impression that I was opening the debate and then Brad would follow and then we'd have rebuttals. But I guess there was an opening act that I was not. Yeah, no, certainly not. That hasn't been true in a while. All right. Well, as edifying as that lecture has been, I think we probably ought to get on.
Okay, as much as I loathe Michael Knowles for so many reasons, not the least of which is he doesn't know a goddamn thing about the woo-woo ideology or astrology or tarot cards or any of that he claims to know about, but he really doesn't know what he's talking about. For all the reasons that I loathe Michael Knowles and his position on trans rights and all that stuff, though I loathe the protesters that are sitting outside that room and shouting and screaming like morons far, 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 far more than I loathe Michael Knowles because they're annoying. And you know, like if you cannot exist in the same space where someone is expressing an opinion that you disagree with, then you are not an adult and you should not be granted any decision-making power or responsibility at all. So, Michael Knowles is not the worst person in this video, at least that we can hear. We can't see them or smell them, thank God, but he's not the worst person in the video that we can hear.
On with the debate. Thank you very much to the police for.
Oh, they shut them up.
That.
Excellent. They shut them up.
All right. Leah, I don't want that to come off my clock. I didn't call for that.
Anything, Michael.
I'd like to begin by thanking a few people. I want to thank Leah. I want to thank ISI. I want to thank my welcoming committee out there. I would especially like to thank Brad for pinch hitting after my original debate opponent withdrew. Brad came in at the last minute. I really appreciate it. Professor McCloskey, who I was initially slated to debate, despite 3 degrees from Harvard, could not defend transgender ideology. He knew my views. We had chatted about them. He repeatedly expressed his desire to debate. Then at the last minute, he withdrew because, I suspect, he felt it more prudent to concede than to lose in front of C-SPAN's cameras. Even a distinguished scholar could not defend the indefensible. My opponent tonight has a more middle-of-the-road position than Professor McCloskey. Unlike Professor McCloskey, Mr. Palumbo does not believe that so-called trans women are really women. He has admitted that they're men. He doesn't think we should trans the kids. He opposes men in women's sports. But he does address men who identify as women as she and her. And he does think they should be allowed into women's bathrooms. This middle-of-the-road position makes even less sense than Professor McCloskey's. At least McCloskey is consistent. He says transgenderism is true, and therefore true.
No, Michael, it's incredibly consistent to offer all people the basic respect and courtesy that you would damn well want yourself. The reason that I respect the pronouns is because I believe that all people have the right to be addressed in the way that they want to be addressed, as long as they're not using it as some sort of power play over me. If they just want to live their lives and they apply the same rules to everyone, then I don't really care, man. If you want to be called he, she, they, zim, zer, whatever neo-pronouns you want, I will do my very best. I'm gonna screw up at times because it's weird and it's ungrammatical, but I really do my best because I believe that all women, or all people, not just women, all people deserve basic respect and courtesy. That is incredibly consistent. If I want people to pronounce my name correctly, which is a Herculean effort for most people in and of themselves, Ben Shapiro is not even capable of pronouncing my name correctly, then I need to afford people the same respect of like addressing them how they want to be addressed. It's just not that hard. And it's certainly not inconsistent.
For everyone of all ages. And therefore, we ought to call some men she and her and allow them into the girls' bathroom and onto women's sports teams and give them all the rights and privileges that our culture and law traditionally reserve for women. My opponent tonight, on the other hand, is inconsistent, even, I'm sorry to say, incoherent on this point. He says transgenderism is not true, but that we ought to pretend that it is.
No, it is true.
But only sometimes.
That's
He
not
has said
correct,
that
Michael.
if Blair White, who's a very nice guy, by the way, who's been on my show, if he were convicted of a crime, that he ought to be sent to a women's prison because surgery and makeup have made him sufficiently dainty, whereas burlier transgender identifying criminals might have to stick with the men. My opponent suggests that we be dishonest enough to call men she, but honest enough not to force women to compete against men in sports, but still dishonest enough to force women to share bathrooms with men. Because the men aren't women, but they should enjoy women's rights and privileges, but only some rights and privileges, and those...
Is it a right and privilege to use the toilet? Because as long as you're not peeking into my stall or forcing me to do something I don't want to do, I don't care. There are laws against people like peeping at other people when they're naked, or laws against like attacking people and assaulting them, regardless of if it's in a restroom or not. Like, I'm covered, man. If you just want to come in and pee and then wash your hands and leave, it's not like I don't care. It makes no difference to me. And in regards to prisons, no, he's not right about that, because if Blair White went to a male prison, Blair White would be a punching bag for the entire time that she is in that prison. Would probably be raped over and 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 over again every day of her life for the entire time that she was in that prison. That's exactly what would happen to Blair White in prison. Do you think that's fair? I don't think that's fair. Carlin, the mistake you're making with pronouns is that the neolibs don't stop just for the respect of how... I don't care! Will you people stop making all of your decisions based on what the left does? Please come up with some original thoughts of your own. Come up with some original positions of your own. Come up with a set of principles that you apply. You are in a constant reactionary state to what the left is doing, and it is your own fault. If every single position you take is, well, the left is doing this, so we have to do that. The left is doing this, so we have to do that. The left is doing this, so we have to do that. We have to oppose everything the left does on principle. Everything the left does, we have to do the opposite of what the left does, no matter how fucking stupid that makes you look. Come up with a set of principles that you apply consistently. I don't give a flying fuck what the neo-libs do or what the neo-libs do not do, because unlike you, Kevin, I am a principled person that applies my principles consistently, regardless of whether or not I like someone's political ideology.
Based on, I don't know. I'm sure Brad will do his best to explain that in just a moment. Seems a bit haphazard to me. Above all, though, my opponent believes the law should pretty much stay out of it. It is this last point that matters for tonight's debate, because tonight's debate does not concern
conservatives constantly reacting to what the left is doing and doing the opposite of whatever the neo-libs are doing is far, 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 far more offensive to me than a trans woman wanting to be called she. Just so we're clear.
Whether transgenderism is true or even how to address it. Tonight's debate concerns a more basic question. Should the law regulate transgenderism at all? On that question, there is not much to debate, because regardless of whether or not one wishes for the law to regulate transgenderism, it will. Even the most tolerant, open-minded, pluralistic society cannot simultaneously uphold mutually contradictory principles. In even the most liberal society, the law must answer at least certain basic questions. If the law has nothing to say about what a woman is, then the law has nothing to say at all. My opponent might suggest we leave it to private business to decide, but the practical implications of transgenderism extend far beyond private business, to the military, to public schools, to government employees, and to many other sectors of society. The law cannot evade the question. The bathroom issue keeps coming up because it is so clear and so instructive. It presents a conflict between two supposed rights.
Exactly.
The right of
Exactly.
women to have their
No,
own
you're not,
bathrooms,
Kevin. I'm
and
sorry.
the supposed right of some men.
No, 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 no. You might get your conservative friends to put up with your bullshit, but that's not going to fly here. If you are in a state of reacting to whatever the left is doing and saying we need to do the opposite of what the left is doing all the time, you are not a principled person. You are a reactionary. Jen says they focus too much on pronouns and toilet, not the unethical behavior of the medical community around minors or the prison system. Jen, this is another great point. This is actually a really great point. I'm really glad that you brought this up. I completely agree with you that they are focusing significantly more on things that are not as important, because that's the only they're reactionaries. That's literally all they know how to do, is focus on things that are not as important, because they're incapable of actually dealing with principles on their own. How sad. Hang on, I'm just fixing my knitting. I messed up my knitting. And that's more important to me at this particular moment. There we go.
Men to go into the women's bathroom, thereby abolishing women's bathrooms. The law must pick a side. There is no neutrality. Unlike some other political issues, there can be no middle ground. Either women get their own bathrooms or they don't. Either women have rights and legal protections as women, as they always have.
See, and this is the reaction of every conservative. So, you don't agree with me and you're calling me unprincipled, and therefore you must be in favor of compelled speech. Are you crying, Kevin? Are you crying? Did the mean woman on the internet hurt your feelings when you expose yourself as a reactionary shill who only cares about what the left is doing? So now you're in favor, Kevin, of just making shit up that has no basis in reality at all because you got your poor feelings hurt? Is that a conservative ideal, to just make shit up when you get your precious fifis hurt? This must be why you guys are just winning so much, because every time the mean woman on the internet tells you truths that you don't want to hear, you just make shit up that has no basis in reality at all. How's that working out for you, Kevin?
Or they don't. The law might say they do, and the law might say they don't. But the one thing the law cannot say is nothing.
Hi, everybody. I want to say thank you to ISI for having us, and thank you to Michael for being willing to have this debate. And I would like to say to the people outside or inside, who are not just interested in having their voices heard, but in trying to shut down.
Hang on, I got a super chat from One Catholic Speaks. Think for yourself. So how also offering the link for the raw debate, then we can watch whether. Well, One Catholic Speaks, I'm pretty sure that you are probably intelligent enough to search on YouTube to find the debate yourself, but you're also welcome to go to the Substack that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, where I send out all of the links and all of the show notes, where you can find the link yourself. So you have two viable options. You can avail yourself of the link that I already sent out and posted on a website earlier today, or you can search on YouTube for the video yourself, and you are welcome to avail yourself of it that way. but thanks for the money. I do appreciate it. Emphasize says, middle schoolers accused of really bad assault for misgendering BBC altered rape victims' quotes to not miss. I don't give a flying fuck, Emphasize. Like, is this a Mercury retrograde thing? Like, honestly, are conservatives just being, like, extra stupid today? I like... Yes, Sam. I just searched it for 10 seconds and I found it. Mind if I post the link? Yes, Sam, please do. Please do. Let's help the conservatives out. They don't know how to Google today. I also, by the way, I get this from conservatives all the time. Like, any time that I do a reaction video, they're like, why are you talking over the video? Bro, go search the video yourself and find it. Like, I know this is like, I mean, maybe, am I just being persnickety? Am I being extra persnickety today? Like, seriously, you're gonna send in a super chat and say, can you please link to the video so we can watch it without your commentary? Like, I mean, come on. This is why conservatives lose. I know I've said this a million times. This is like literally why conservatives lose. They annoy the shit out of every single person who does not want to buy into their bullshit. So that even if those people think that the left is insane, as I do. Side note, do you guys know that I got into a whole argument with a Playboy bunny pretending to be a conservative on Twitter today? And she was like, Carlin, you only ever complain about conservatives. And I was like, oh yeah? Let me show you all of the articles that I've written exposing the left that you've never shared. And she's like, I followed your work for years, but all you do is complain about conservatives. And I was like, well, let me give you a whole long list of articles that I've written about the left. And let me, like, will you share these? Because you've never shared one before. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. All you do is complain about conservatives. Like, here's a whole list of articles that I've written about the left. Like, it really is. It's like, I can't, like, my mind is just blown at how ridiculous the people in this political ideology are. And listen, man, if I'm not talking about you personally, then what I'm saying doesn't apply to you. But seriously, you're going to annoy everyone that you could potentially get to vote for you in 2024 by being so ridiculous that there's just no possible way that any of us can take you seriously? I do take Mama Tembo seriously. Mama Tembo, because Mama Tembo is a valued member of my community, and I know she's a sane person that's hinged into reality. With all due respect, Carlin, I think you're expecting and assuming too much of the conservatives. They're lazy and refuse to think critically or question their positions. I agree, Mama Tembo. How freaking childish is it to pay someone to give you a link to a video that you can see the name? I can't. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to stop complaining. Kevin, I'm going to just block you. We need to just acknowledge, Kevin, that this isn't going to work. You're going to keep saying stupid shit in my chat. I'm going to keep yelling at you. And I don't want to keep interrupting the video to deal with your bullshit. So goodbye, Kevin. Like, we're just going to remedy that situation right now.
On this debate, grow the hell up. The debate is happening, whether you like it or not. It's your choice to participate in it or bury your head in the sand. This is America. We have free speech, and I just don't really stand for anybody who would try to shut down the voices they disagree with rather than engage with them. Now, I want to start by pointing out something that might seem surprising, but I am a gay agnostic libertarian, yet I recently, or not too recently, found out that I have something in common with a Orthodox Christian conservative baker you might have heard of, named Jack Phillips. You see, I met him a few years ago when he was the subject of a Supreme Court case because gay rights activists had harangued him into court, trying to force him to bake a gay wedding cake. Then trans activists came and invented a gender transition cake and wanted him to bake that too. But when I met him, I realized we actually had much more in common than I had ever anticipated, because we both believe in pluralism, freedom of speech, and the general laissez-faire, live and let live idea of America, that we can have radically different worldviews and beliefs, but live in peace side by side, without either side trying to conquer or force the other side to bend the knee. But those activists who chased him into court, who harassed his business, harassed his family, drove away his customers, tried to use the force of the law to eradicate his beliefs, his bigoted and evil beliefs in their view. They do not. They reject America's classically liberal, pluralistic values. And unfortunately, I have to tell you that Michael Knowles and people of his intellectual ilk, they do too. They've unfortunately become essentially a right-wing version of those LGBT activists who seek to use the state to police how other people can live their lives and restrict them from living in ways they personally disapprove of. You don't have to take my word for it.
Thank you, Vaughn.
Michael recently said at a speech I'm sure you're all aware of that we should eradicate transgenderism from public life. Now, to be fair to Michael, he was not, as some of his critics have mischaracterized him, calling for pogroms or for people to be killed. But what he was calling for, and what he has called for many times in many other places, is to ban transgenderism, to ban adults from receiving medical transition treatments, to ban adults from using preferred pronouns and names in public, to ban adults from accessing facilities that align with their outward appearance. And even in the case of transgender TikToker Dylan Mulvaney, who I will admit is pretty cringe, Michael has called for Dylan Mulvaney to be institutionalized. That's what we do to serial killers who plead not guilty by virtue of mental insanity. We lock them up, deprive them of their liberty, take them away from their family. And that's what apparently folks like Michael Knowles think should be done to outspoken transgender adults, because he disapproves of their lifestyle, he disapproves of their beliefs, and he disapproves of their words. Now, I'm here to suggest that that totalitarian
doing a great job
approach
so far
to debating social issues is fundamentally inconsistent with conservative principles of individual liberty, limited government, and the classically liberal society that conservatives in the
don't
US
believe
have
in
always
limited
wanted
government.
to conserve. But it's also remarkably short-sighted.
There's
About
no wrong about
30% of the United States identifies as socially conservative. About 23% identifies as Catholic, which is Michael's faith. And I'm from New England, so that I know that a lot of those Catholics are actually pretty libbed out. So what you have is a minority of the country, a small minority, that actually...
That's actually really interesting. I didn't realize that only like 30% of the country identifies as socially conservative, and yet conservatives keep hitting on these social conservatism issues like over and over and over again, thinking that that's going to win them elections. It's just, he's right. This is like a horrible strategy.
holds ultra-traditionalist beliefs on social issues. So if we want to start having the majority rules approach of suppressing lifestyles you don't approve of shutting down ideas, of banning ideas and lifestyles that aren't in alignment with your values, that is not going to go well for my friends on the religious right.
No, it's not.
Now, none of this is to say we must have a totally anarchist approach to transgender issues. I think we can reasonably and fairly discuss questions about medical, societal, and perhaps even government.
Armani! Conservatives complain about shifting left, yet don't realize they're spouting third-wave feminist points, posturing men as inherently predatory. Well, Armani. You're right. Holy shit. I hadn't thought about it like that before, Armani. So he's right. So what he's saying is that every time conservatives are like, you don't want a trans woman in the bathroom, do you? What they're saying is that men are inherently predatory of women. And there is no way that a man can be in a bathroom with a woman without, like, assaulting them. You are absolutely 100% correct. And this is one of the things that's so amazing about conservatives is, like, they don't think through, because, and this is why I hammer on not being reactionary, because if your political position is everything that the left does is bad, and I'm going to do the opposite of whatever the left does, that is a reactionary position that's going to back you into corner after corner after corner that doesn't make sense, and you're not going to be thinking through to the logical end conclusions of what that means. And in this case, saying all trans people are bad and they should never be able to use a bathroom that aligns with how they look. Like, it's going to lead to, okay, well, why can't they use the bathroom that aligns with how they look? Do you believe that all men are going to fundamentally assault women? And isn't that saying that all men are isn't that acknowledging toxic masculinity? Aren't you actually acknowledging toxic masculinity at that point? So you agree that men are toxically masculine? I mean, it's like, it goes down this whole road of, like, just think through the logical conclusions of what you're saying and take a principled position, not a reactionary position.
Governmental restrictions on things like children making decisions for medical treatments they can't really consent to, that could have life-altering consequences. I think we can protect rules that ensure fairness in sports where it's applicable. I think we can navigate these nuances without depriving our American adult peers of the right to live their lives how they see fit in accordance with their values. Because that's the test of freedom. It's easy to believe in freedom for the people you like. It's easy to believe in freedom for your friends, for the people on your team. But you have to believe in freedom for the people you don't like, the people that give you the ick. If you don't believe in freedom for anybody. And unfortunately, the approach that Michael Knowles and his ilk advocate on these issues is inconsistent with traditional conservative values of individual liberty, and it would ultimately set the stage for their own downfall. So we should take a pluralistic and classical liberal approach to these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I am shocked to hear that I'm not pluralistic. I consider myself very, very open-minded, as we all are in America, but on certain issues we cannot be totally open-minded. Because on some issues you see a conflict of rights and a conflict of claimed rights and a conflict of freedom. So if we were debating tax policy, we might come to some conciliatory middle ground and we might hear all sides. If we were discussing immigration, we might say, okay.
Michael, what you do with your body is quite literally none of my business. And what I do with my body is quite literally none of your business. So there is not a single trans person, Michael, that is taking away any of your rights through sheer virtue of being trans. Yes, John, I am saying that we should not have societal norms, because who decides societal norms? I don't want your religion deciding what I can and cannot do, what I can and cannot say, what I can and cannot do to my own body, what I can and cannot put into my own body. I do not want your religion deciding for me what is appropriate. So no, we shouldn't have those things at all in any way.
Okay, we take in 3 million immigrants a year today. Conservatives don't want to take in any more immigrants. We've taken in a lot, but okay, let's meet in the middle somewhere. On this issue, we can't do that because either the women have the bathrooms or they don't. Either the women have the sports teams or they don't. Certain issues, you can't just meet in the middle. On certain issues, you would split the baby, which is no good for anybody. So here, Brad is claiming the freedom of the transgender identifying people, men who think that they're women mistakenly, to enter into the women's bathroom. And what I'm defending is the genuine freedom and right of women to have their own bathrooms. Only one of those is going to win out. Only one of those is in accordance with reality. So I would just as soon defend the one that happens to align with the truth. Now, a lot of what Brad just said is not true. Brad said that America is very liberal and open-minded on these transgender issues. It doesn't seem to be the case. According to Pew Research, 60% of Americans say that manhood and womanhood is determined by biological sex. And so I wish it were 100%, but 60% is not bad. It's a clear majority of the country. It's up from 56% just a couple of years ago, and it's up from 54% in 2017. So the American people are on our side on transgender issues because they have eyes and a brain.
Oh, so Michael Knowles wants a dictatorship of the majority where the majority decides what is right for everyone else. Well, Michael, since Brad correctly pointed out earlier that only 30% of people in this country embrace social conservatism, do you want the majority deciding whether or not you're allowed to be socially conservative? And for the person who got his chat removed earlier that asked if I support murder and rape, what I have said repeatedly for those conservatives in the back who refuse to open their fucking ears and listen is that you, as long as you are not hurting me or taking my stuff, which is what the non-aggression principle says, then I do not care. A person being trans does not hurt me and it does not take my stuff. A person like watching pornography in their own home does not hurt me and it does not take my stuff. I just don't know what is so difficult about this to understand. And if conservatives are going to go to the most extremist positions on everything, well, you must believe in murder and rape if you want adults to be trans. Are you fucking shitting me? I will continue to talk down to you in the most condescending way that I possibly can when you make the most stupid, boneheaded arguments in my chat and you apply extremist views to something that it doesn't even logically apply to. Saying that I don't care if someone is trans is not the same thing, conservatives, as condoning murder and rape. And you look really fucking stupid when you make that argument.
And the American people are increasingly on our side on these issues. As for the freedom of these people to mutilate themselves and to harm themselves, I wonder if Brad would extend that same conception of freedom to someone who suffers from a body integrity disorder. Body integrity disorder is very similar to transgenderism in that it involves people, usually early onset, about 8 to 12 years old, who will imagine that a healthy limb does not really belong to them, and they'll ask a doctor to cut off that healthy limb. This would be medical malpractice today. I don't think any of us would want to allow some poor soul to have their limbs chopped off because of a disorder. We would want to give them psychiatric treatment. So I don't really see why the same principle wouldn't hold true here, especially considering the very harmful effects of the transition. The largest data set on sex reassignment procedures, both hormonal and surgical, reveals no mental health benefits whatsoever. This was in October 2019, the American Journal of Psychiatry. In fact, what the data set showed was that the transition...
Okay, John, if you continue to argue in my chat that murder and rape are the same things as someone being trans, I'm going to block you for being a raging fucking moron. This is a new rule that I'm creating because apparently we can't have nice things and talk about nuanced issues in regards to transgender people with conservatives in my chat. So I am now implementing if you say stupid extremist things in my chat purely to be inflammatory and to be ridiculous and to distract everyone from actually engaging in a nuanced conversation, then I'm just going to remove you from the equation. If you would like to come in and have a nuanced conversation, John, and not accuse people who don't care if people are trans of engaging in murder and rape, then we can have a different discussion. But now the rule is clear. It has been clearly laid out. That's what we're going to do for the rest of the stream. And for people who want to continue to engage in nonsense, you're welcome to engage in nonsense, but I'm going to remove you from the chat and take away your ability to do so.
made the patient's mental health deteriorate, at least on one point, which is anxiety. Rates of transgender regret are skyrocketing. Lord Robert Winston, surgeon and scientist in the UK, found that 40% of people who undergo what we'll call euphemistically bottom surgery experience complications. Many need further surgery. Quarter of the women who undergo top surgery feel uncomfortable with what they have done.
There are plenty of trans people who say it was the best decision they've ever made and it allows them to live a happier life. So whether or not you personally think it's harmful or whether or not their family and friends think it's harmful really doesn't make any sort of difference, because they are the rulers of their own lives. They are the rulers of their own body. I don't know what this is. I just don't know why this is so hard to understand. You don't get to control other people's bodies. You don't get to control other people's bodies. You don't get to control other people's bodies. God.
Harms people immensely. It is growing. It is raging. The numbers of young people who identify with it have doubled in recent years, and that's why we shouldn't subject people to it. Thank you, Leah, for that very kind reminder that I've gone over time.
Thank you.
So a few points to touch on there. But as to the question of polling, the American public's view on these issues is pretty nuanced. But I could also show you polls that say 60, 70% of Americans believe in anti-discrimination protections for transgender people. In fact, I think the eradicate transgenderism from public life position, even as Michael describes it, not as his critics do, is not going to poll high in America. And if all you have to offer to one extreme is the opposite extreme, you're actually making that opposite extreme more likely to succeed.
Yep.
Imagine if instead of running against gun control, you had to run on let people own nukes. Imagine if instead of running on let's not do socialism, you had to run on abolish Social Security, abolish Medicare, abolish everything. Obviously, you're going to be less successful at actually achieving power, at winning an election, at building a consensus to accomplish what you want to accomplish, which in our case, for example, is protecting children, protecting fairness in sports, these kinds of things.
How do you guys think I'm going to react to this comment? Your language has soured this video. I won't watch when you're this cranky. I will say whatever the fuck I want, and I will swear as much as I fucking want. And if you guys don't like it, then you are welcome to leave the house. Complaining about my language is only going to make me fucking swear more than I already fucking was. And there's nothing that you guys can do about it. So take your little Christian sensibilities somewhere else. Go away. You want to know why I'm cranky? I have conservatives in my chat trying to control my language, trying to compel my language. I have conservatives in my chat saying what people can and cannot do with their own fucking bodies. I have conservatives in my chat saying that if you don't care if people are trans, then you condone murder and rape. It's just like, are we ever going to elevate ourselves, conservatives? And I know that not everyone watching right now are conservatives, and I want to acknowledge that. Most of the people in my chat are actually not conservatives at all. But you're really going to complain about my fucking language? Go fuck yourself. Truly. If my language is the most important thing that you have to fucking worry about, and yes, I am absolutely throwing in a few more fucks because I will say whatever the fuck I want. If my language is the most important thing that you have to fucking worry about, conservatives, then you are so unhinged and divorced from reality, I don't even know what to fucking say. I truly don't. If I could get conservatives to put half of the energy into fighting back against what the fucking schools are doing to their fucking kids, as I get from conservatives trying to control my fucking language, we probably wouldn't even have a problem in the public schools. That's the truth. The vast majority of conservatives that I block on my channel are trying to actively compel my fucking language. Either they're demanding that I use the pronouns that they want me to use for people, or they are like complaining about the fact that I swear too fucking much for their fragile fucking sensibilities. But if I could get conservatives to put half of the fucking energy into focusing on what the schools are doing or doing things that are actively productive to fight back against what the left is doing to this country, then we would be in a completely different space. So I will say whatever the fuck I want, conservatives. And if you don't like that, then you can take yourself over to Michael Knowles' YouTube channel and you can hang out there and get all the sweet nothings that you want whispered in your ears. He'll say all the nice things that you want to hear. He'll tell you that trans people are awful. He'll tell you that you don't have to use the pronouns. He will tell you everything you want to hear, conservatives, I promise. But when we're on this channel, I will say what I fucking want, and you aren't obligated to be here.
If all you're offering is the complete and opposite extreme, and that's what Knowles and his company are offering. As far as bodily integrity...
Sorry, we just got a super chat. Apparently my saying fuck 87 times has inspired some money, so I appreciate that, Armani. Imagine a political party spending 2 years arguing bodily autonomy to only reverse course completely to request we ban abortion and adults translating. Armani, like, gold star to Armani today, because like this is another great argument. For 2 straight years, conservatives argued, our body, our choice, our body, our choice, our body, our choice, our body, our choice. We don't want vaccines. We don't want masks. Our body, our choice, our body, our choice. And then as soon as COVID is over, they're like, we want to control your body and deny you the trans surgery that you want, even though you're making the decision as an adult. And if you don't let us do it, then you're something. I don't even know what. But no, this is exactly correct. And this is how, by the way, conservatives never believed my body, my choice. They never believed it. For the entire time they were screaming it just to own the libs. Never believed a word that was coming out of their own mouths.
Disorder or the benefits to transition supposedly not existing. I'm not here to quibble with the scientific data. I'm not an expert in any of that, and neither is Michael. I'm here to say it's not up to us. You're a fully grown adult. It's up to you to decide what's best for you. And as far as chopping off your limbs and bodily disorder, no doctor in their right mind is going to do that. Whether you agree with it or not, it is the case that most doctors, most medical authorities, most medical bodies do recommend transition for adults with persistent gender dysphoria. So I don't view it as my place or our place to get in the way of that relationship. If that's what they want to do, if that's what will make them happy, who are we to second guess it? Who are we to tell them how to live their lives? I don't want the government policing my wardrobe, my speech, what pronouns I use. I don't want the government telling me what I can believe, what I can say, how I can live my life. If you don't want that, you have to respect that for transgender adults as well.
Exactly.
I'll start with a question for each speaker.
Brad.
A medium free-flowing conversation moderated by my gavel. Mr. Palumbo, in your rebuttal, you were saying that your concern is about the efficacy of Mr. Knowles' approach. It's not popular. I'm curious both whether you think he's right and he should just be differently strategic in how he approahes it, and whether it's always ineffective to make an unpopular point plainly and honestly, or kind of as a feint. Should the anti-abortion, pro-life movement have responded to kind of the backlash after Dobbs by kind of hiding?
Hang on, Naruto with the super chat. Did you see Biden say there's no such thing as someone else's kid? I did see that. And I wish conservatives would focus a hell of a lot more on that, and the fact that the schools think they own your kids and the teachers think they own your kids and they think they're not even your kids, and the fact that they're trying to take away all your parental rights, which I've written about extensively on my Substack, which is carlin.substack.com. And if conservatives stepped up and focused on that issue more, then they would have a lot less problems than what they're doing right now. But here's the thing. Conservatives are going to lose their kids. Can we just be blunt about it? Conservatives, because of all this trans bullshit, the logical end result of what is going to come is that the left is going to win because they are organized and coordinated and focusing on taking away all of conservatives' parental rights. They're already getting bills passed in Washington and California. They're holding legal symposiums talking about how parental rights are not in the best interest of the kids. Over 6,000 school districts in the country have written into school district policy that they don't have to inform the parents of what gender the kid is going by at the school. If conservatives were more focused on that issue than they are on what people are doing with their own bodies, then they might have a shot in hell. But at the rate that we're going, for people who are just complaining, oh, Carolyn's cranky today, at the rate that we're going, conservatives, you are going to get your children taken away, and it is going to be entirely your fault, and it would have been entirely preventable had you just fucking focused on things that actually fucking matter, rather than focusing on my speech and what's coming out of my mouth and the words you don't like. If you had actually focused on protecting your parental rights, which are right now being stripped right from out from under you, maybe you could have saved your own kids. But as it's going right now, they are going to take your children away. If your kids come home from school after you sent them to public school, after I told you not to send them to public school over and repeatedly, but you still ignored that because your school is in a safe red area. It's not a progressive city. They're not doing this stuff in my area. No, they are doing this stuff in your area. And you sent them to public school anyway. And then one day your kid comes home at 14, 15 years old and decides they're trans. And you're really surprised by this. You're like, no, you're not really trans. And the kid says, yes, I am trans. And you're saying, no, you're not trans. But the kid is already socially transitioned at school. The kid's already been using different name and pronouns at the school for a while now. You just didn't know about it because you didn't listen when I told you that schools are enacting into their policy that they don't have to inform you of what's actually going on. And so you didn't listen to that, but your little darling has already been socially transitioned at school. And now your little darling is coming to you because it's time to go on the puberty blockers. But you don't want to do that. And so you also ignored the fact that while you weren't paying attention because you were focused on what pronouns to call people, while you weren't paying attention, your state passed a law saying they can terminate your parental rights after your child turns 12 years old, which again has happened in Washington and California right now. And so because you deny your little darling puberty blockers, the school psychologist can then recommend to the state that they remove your child from your house because you won't give them the life-saving trans medication that they need. That is all real. Everything I just said is real. But no, we're focused on, well, I don't want to call Dylan Mulvaney she. That's one option. You can focus on whether or not you call Dylan Mulvaney she, but I think you're probably going to be focused on more important issues when the state takes your children away from policies and laws that they have already enacted that you weren't paying attention to because you're hate watching Dylan Mulvaney videos over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So you might not like my mean language, conservatives, but I'm giving you the best advice you're getting anywhere on the internet, and you're not fucking listening. Thank you for the super sticker, philanthropist. I really, or philosophist, excuse me, philosophist. I appreciate it. See, Antoinetta here has learned nothing. Learned absolutely nothing. And Antoinette is going to get her kids taken away. And I'm going to laugh at Antoinetta when that happens because Antoinetta could have learned something and have actually listened. But no, we're still in the no listening phase for Antoinetta. Maybe she'll come around. Who knows? I thought she was leaving personally, but who knows?
Their commitment to a pro-life cause or by openly making the arguments?
Yeah, so I think it's both. I don't fully agree with Michael's positions, but also from a pure tactical position, I would say it's wrong.
I always do
run on the opposite extreme. A good example of this is, you want to use the abortion context. I live in Michigan. We had a governor candidate there, Tudor Dixon, who ran on no abortion exceptions, no rape, no incest. Life of the Mother, maybe. She lost terribly. It was every single ad because that was a wildly unpopular position. And as a result, those are like 2% of abortions or whatever. You could have had a governor that would have worked to restrict 98% of abortions. And instead you have Gretchen Whitmer. So you're not going to convince me that just taking the most extreme position because it's honest or because you believe it fully, it's naive if your goal is to actually achieve change. I'm also, of course, just coming at it from a fundamentally different premise in which, look, I believe there's two biological sexes. They are immutable. But there's a lot that we attach to gender that is social. And if someone like Blair White, who I consider an acquaintance and am friendly with, if she wants to live as a woman, have surgery as she has, if that's what will make her happy, and she struggled with deep depression and mental issues, and then that helped, why would I object to that? And moreover, why would I embrace some sort of one-size-fits-all government approach that would legally force somebody with C-cup tits to use the men's room and the boys' locker room? It doesn't make any sense.
I think the more concern you have for women, the less you should use the word tits on the stage. I mean it. Mr. Knowles.
That, by the way, is also a stupid thing to be annoyed about. He should be able to use whatever fucking language he wants to use. Sorry. That's okay, Douglas. I appreciate the sentiment. Oh, hang on, Armani. Carlin took us to church today. Yes, preach, Mama. See, here's the thing. For everyone who's pissed off at the words I don't like, most of my audience likes when I lose my shit on you guys. Most of my audience are here because of my rants against conservative bullshit. And you want to know why? Because it pisses them off too. And I'm saying all the things that they want to say to you, but they aren't on a YouTube channel and don't want to use their real name on the internet. So you might, she's kinky today. Wah. There are a lot of people who are here for this.
I know that you think that when someone asks you to address them by their pronouns, their preferred pronouns, they're asking you to lie to them or be complicit in a lie. But that's clearly not the only time that you believe you're asked to lie in a pluralistic society. And I don't usually see you going to Episcopalian churches to tell them you don't believe they're offering the body of Christ.
But I'm not asked to go to Episcopalian churches, mercifully.
Well, I was going to ask why, but that's a higher stakes question for you, right? Where is Christ present? Where is he not? Why is this the issue where you want to bring the force of law, the force of your voice to contest this disagreement among the many you have with your neighbors?
Well, because this one would appear to be exclusive. This one is inescapable. I can escape from the Episcopalian church down the street, and I don't attend it. I can escape from many liberal Catholic churches down the street, by the way, for that matter, and there's no problem. Nobody's forcing me to attend. But on the question here, women will have bathrooms or they won't. Women will have sports teams or they won't. And I will engage in conversation with people because we live in a society. We're not atomized individuals, and no man is an island entire of himself.
You know what I'd like to do? I would like to ban all men from using porta potties at public events because they quite frankly piss on the seat and make a mess. And when I go to use the porta potty, I don't want there to be piss on the seat because it's a public space and it's inconvenient to me. Should we ban all men from using porta potties that are in the public domain? If you're like at a concert or an event or something, can we make that agreement, Michael? When there's only one bathroom that men should not be allowed to use it, and if they are allowed to use it, then they should sit their asses down and pee sitting down instead of peeing standing up, so that we can keep everything nice for all of us and not inconvenience anyone on our way. I'm pretty sure that every woman and possibly several men are going to agree with me in the chat that we should probably ban men from using porta potties at public outside events where there are no indoor bathrooms.
So when I am to refer to somebody, especially as a matter of public life, if I am not permitted to refer to him as him and her as her, I am being forced to lie in my regular everyday life. Contrary to what Brad suggested, I am not a totalitarian. I'm not an authoritarian.
Yes,
I'm
you
not
are.
against pluralism or whatever. But there are certain issues on which one side has to win and one side has to lose because they can't exist together
That's
at the
not
same
true.
time. So Brad points out that
No. This is how you know that Michael Knowles is an authoritarian. I fully embrace and respect the right of the citizens of the state of Vermont to create their own little communist Marxist society in the state of Vermont. I really do. Where I am actively tracking what is going on in the Burlington, Vermont school district, I pay attention very closely to what is going on in Vermont because Vermont is quite literally made up of like 75% socialists at this point. That's not an exaggeration. That's like clocked. That's true. And Vermont is going to very literally create a little communist society in their neck of the woods. And I'm specifically looking at Burlington because I think that Burlington, Vermont is going to be the first city in America that is 100% built on equity. It's all over their school district. It's all over their school policies in every school in the city. It's all over the city policies as well. They're quite literally building budgets based on equity. And I've documented all this on my Substack. I fully embrace the right of the citizens of Vermont to create a communist Marxist society. And I fully embrace the right of the citizens of New Hampshire, which is right next to Vermont, to create a libertarian homeland. We can both coexist. We can each have our own areas. As long as I'm not forced to live in Vermont, and I'm sure as shit not going to force any communists from Vermont to live in New Hampshire where they obviously don't want to live. They would not be happy here at all. We can create our own societies in which we all know what the values of the society are, and we all know that that society over there is doing something different, and maybe we can trade and we can work together when it makes sense to do so, to do things that are mutually beneficial. But I'm going to leave the commies in Vermont alone, and I have to hope and pray that they leave us the F alone as well. It is not true that we can't peacefully coexist. The only time it becomes true that we can't peacefully coexist is when one group in society is trying to force, through state edict and government force, they're trying to force the other group to live the way they want them to live. This is exactly the definition of being an authoritarian. That's why Michael Knowles is an authoritarian. He thinks that it should be his way or the highway, and he will use the power of the state, should he ever get it, to force other people to live the way that he himself would live. But I don't want to be a conservative Catholic. I want nothing to do with Michael Knowles' ideology. I want nothing to do with Catholicism. No offense to Catholics. Like, if it works for you, fine, do whatever you want. But I don't want anything to do with it. But I'm more than happy to let Michael Knowles be a conservative Catholic over in Tennessee. Just don't force that shit on me. I don't think this is too hard.
Blair, who's a very nice guy, as I pointed out, might feel better by being allowed to go into a women's bathroom. I'm skeptical of that. None of the data, which I always think are ridiculous, but I'm happy to cite social science when it backs up my point. But all of the data that we have suggests that there is no mental health benefit whatsoever from these sorts of surgeries and from the hormone therapies. So I'm skeptical that it would make him feel any better. But then I have to ask, what about the women? What about the women who would very much like to have their own bathrooms? Wouldn't that make them happy? Don't they have some rights?
So I want to press you here because you're falling on the bathroom example when you've also talked about involuntary commitment. And I think on the spectrum of where the law intervenes, the bathroom is both kind of the least, charged issue to kind of fall back on, and saying at a certain point of delusion, I think someone who disagrees with me on this issue should be confined. I want to hear you defend that point rather than the bathroom access.
I think that what's very important here is prudence. This is one of those forgotten virtues that people in our highly ideological age think that we need to have a manifesto written in 5 bullet points on a napkin to answer every question. But for example, if someone is a man who has fallen into the transgender rabbit hole, and for him it is, as it historically has been for pretty much everybody, a sexual fetish, a paraphilia of cross-dressing that is largely driven by
that's a little bit
pornography
rude
today.
and dismissive.
But that man still understands that he's a man. This is
Michael Knowles literally just said that all trans men are trans because of trans women, because I don't think he actually applies this to trans men. He's just literally said that the only reason people are trans is a sexual fetish. Now, do I think that some trans people are trans because of a sexual fetish? I mean, sure, I'm sure that's probably true. But it seems incredibly dismissive to me to say that historically the only reason people are trans is because of a sexual fetish. Like, are you kidding me?
This is just a little weird thing that he does at home, and it makes him have a thrill, and okay, fine, we live in a fallen world. I wouldn't suggest we need to commit that man. But there is a spectrum here of irrationality and insanity. Let's call it what it is. And so if a man is convinced that he really is a woman, like in some of those viral videos we've all seen of the big burly man screaming in the bodega, my name is ma'am, and he's acting out in a way that is really disorderly and disrupting the public and harmful to himself. For instance, if he wants to chop off his own healthy body parts and cause all sorts of destruction to himself, then I think not only is it the right of society to take some action here to restore order, but I think it's only compassionate for that person. I think it's a very selfish and shallow kind of liberalism that says that when people have mental problems, we ought to just let them out on the street, often to die of exposure or to go do drugs in some back alley in San Francisco. No, we owe them help. Brad asks, who am I to tell people what to do? Why would I use the force of government? We live in America. America is at least supposed to be a self-government. You're a citizen with faculties of reason and a moral conscience. You can perceive truth. And it is not only your right, but your responsibility to do so, to help your fellow countrymen.
I'll give you a moment. Yes, absolutely.
Can you explain, Michael, why you want the government to be the arbiter of truth, to decide what beliefs? I mean, I've lived through the government tell us there were WMDs in Iraq, lie to us.
That's a really good point. I can't wait to hear what Brad has to say there. The other Jenny, thank you for calling out the conservative hypocrites on their crap. Dr. B, I live for your rants. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that. I appreciate people who like my rants. I think some of my rants are very good and on point. And I don't even remember them after I do them, so that means they're coming from somewhere. Jen says, so Michael is fine with calling Blair Blair when it comes to her pronouns. Nope, he seriously doesn't see the hypocrisy. No, he doesn't see the hypocrisy at all. Blair, by the way, guys, do you guys know that Blair White's real name on her driver's license is not Blair? I've seen Blair White's driver's license. That's not what the name is on the driver's license. Why is Michael Knowles calling Blair Blair? Why is he using the name that Blair selected while refusing to use the corresponding pronouns? Michael, that just seems a little hypocritical for me. It seems a little inconsistent. You open this whole debate saying that Brad was being completely inconsistent. Well, Michael, you are very provably being inconsistent when you are calling Blair White because Blair's name on her driver's license that I have seen in person is not Blair.
Every which way about COVID. And you are saying that the government and the people that run it should be an arbiter of truth and then should involuntarily commit and basically lock people up who don't meet their perception.
Yeah, and why is
truth.
Blair not
Can you
woman-based?
explain to me as a matter of prudence how that could possibly be a good idea?
Well, I'm not saying that the government
Only
is
Dylan,
the
not
arbiter
Blair.
of truth. Of course not. But we have civil authority to establish and to enforce laws. And so we can either establish and enforce laws on the basis of pure will, a man who says, I very much want to be a woman, and so that's what we're going to do, completely divorced
Another
from
great
reality
question,
and
Adam.
moral order. Or we can establish and enforce laws as a matter of interpretation, to believe that there is such a thing as objective reality and a moral order and a natural law that we are then translating into the civil law. Traditionally, in our country and in all states, we have pursued the latter. In our age that now seems to be increasingly untethered from reality, where people will mock the very notion of objective truth, we say that that cannot happen. But to my points earlier, the law will say something, inevitably. The government is not some foreign entity. We live in America where we have some say in our government, even still today. And the law must necessarily say something. Either the women get, the reason I keep going to the bathrooms is because it's just so clear, but you can use the sports teams, you can use.
I think the involuntary commitment one is relevant though, because I think, this is not the level of force that Mr. Palumbo is worried about as worried about.
Well,
bathroom
I suppose.
rules.
Right. I mean, bathrooms are smaller scale, but what I would say is that these issues are complicated and they should be decentralized. Let a business decide their own bathroom policies. I've been to a lot of places in liberal cities that solve this by having single stall unisex bathrooms.
I agree.
Don't have a one-size-fits-all solution just crammed on
I'm
the whole
going to stay on the commitment question for a second so Mr. Palumbo can field a question himself. Certainly the government does draw lines around some people who should be committed, whether due to risk to others or sometimes risk to themselves. I'm curious how you, Mr. Palumbo, feel the government should respond. Is it right to commit someone for treatment for anorexia, which does not put them as a danger to others, purely because we believe them to be a danger to themselves, to have a false belief about their body?
I think there has to be a very high threshold for civil commitment. We've seen it horribly abused in the past in this country. But I think it has to be a direct danger to themselves or others, right? Their physical safety. So trans or not trans, if somebody is a danger, a suicide risk, or if they're a threat to others, then we can discuss involuntary commitment. But what we're talking about here is essentially saying, well, we think somebody has deluded and wrong beliefs, so they should be locked up. I mean, that would have gotten that's the approach that had people wanting to lock up and kill Galileo for daring to suggest that the Earth was not the center of the universe. I don't think we know the truth. Aiden. That's part of the process of discovering the truth. And let me just say, and I'm not saying this, but a large swath of the country thinks that the Catholic faith, believing in a God, is a deluded belief, is a delusion. Should they want to have you committed?
No, the majority of Americans still believe in God.
I don't think.
Maybe not in 50 years.
Not your God, Michael.
The best use of this time, I'm going to have the Galileo fisticuffs happen outside. And
I will point out on that point that they did lock up Galileo, and they locked him up for being a jerk. It had nothing to do with his stupid scientific book.
I would gloss it if they locked Galileo up for being politically taking chances that were imprudent. But what I want to ask here on this question for a moment is, when it comes to these questions, you've said it's hard to be sure, right? You've said, Mr. Palumbo, that you're not an expert in the science. Mr. Knowles, you've brought a number of citations with varying confidence in different ones. What is your greatest source of uncertainty for each of you right now about the current growth in transgender identification, in the roots of it? And what would you most like to know that you don't know now?
Well, I would just like to correct you, Leah. You've said that I've had varying degrees of confidence in the scientific studies. I have no confidence in any of them. I'm just citing them because they back up my argument.
What would you actually like to see?
What?
I mean it, right? Like,
kudos for honesty.
Wow.
I think you're right that this is an issue that's been understudied because no one does a randomized controlled trial. That's true of a lot of things where we really care about the answer. So what would you most like to see studied in a scientific context that you think would help you and your opponents at the end of it have a better understanding of what's true?
I would most like to see this issue studied not through biology and not through some bizarre sociology course in a gender studies department, but through anthropology and through ontology and through philosophy. Because ultimately what this comes down to, I'm happy that all the scientific studies back up my view, but I wouldn't really care even if they didn't. Because the question is, what is the human person? The claim of transgenderism, it keeps moving. But the claim basically is that one's true self has nothing to do with one's body. So one can be in body entirely a man, but at some deeper metaphysical level, one can be a woman. And so the old way we used to talk about this would be the distinction between the body and the soul. And there's been a whole lot written about the relationship between the body and the soul.
Agree.
The conception that has dominated for at least 2,300 years in our civilization is an idea called hylomorphism, which is that body and soul are united and sex derives from the body and is an inseparable accident of the individual that persists and applies to the whole person. So That's to me a fascinating conversation. Maybe eyes are glazing over here in the room, but the question that we're asking here is, what is a man? What is a woman? And I am not happy with even the conservative answer, which is a woman is a womb and 2 X chromosomes. I don't know what 2 X chromosomes are. If you told me that a woman is sugar, spice, and everything nice, that to me is a much more precise description and accurate description of what a woman is. So I'm happy to have those conversations.
But I don't think that is the question. I think the question is who gets to decide. If
Well-
you would have the government decide for everyone, and I would have people decide for themselves. in their own
Yes.
law.
Let me ask you then, Mr. Palumbo. One question the government does make a decision on that arguably is a murkier question is, when is someone legally, morally, intellectually an adult? And that's something where the government cannot remain silent. We write a lot of laws to draw a relatively sharp line between children and adults, even though nothing magical happens on your 18th or 21st, or for the purposes of running for Congress, I think 25th birthday. But the law has to speak. So how do you think about when the law has to draw a distinction? How do you want it to draw it?
I think that 18 is an imperfect legal age of adulthood, but it's the one we have, and we should stick to it. You're either an adult or you're not. And once you're an adult, you have the full freedoms and rights and responsibilities that come with our society. And that should include living your life in a way that traditionalist conservatives don't approve of, think is wrong, think is gross, think is bad. But for minors, I think it is fair to talk about not nearly enough safeguards on this care. I question whether they can even consent to it
But
at all.
I think I have a better sense right now from Mr. Knowles about how he would work through the anthropological question of when should the law set that limit. You say you're comfortable with the current one. Are you comfortable with 19? If the country were with you.
I mean, it's inherently arbitrary. I would say it just has to be consistent. Right now, we kind of have a patchwork of things, like 21 for some things, 18 for some things, 17 for some things. I agree it will be fundamentally arbitrary. I just think it should be consistent. So it could be 18, it could be 19, it could be 21. What irks me is when it's inconsistent.
Well, what I'm asking you just for a moment is there's the question of is it inconsistent and the question of is it correct? And I'm curious, what do you draw on to answer the question of is it correct?
There is
You're trying to draw them to some common number.
She's trying to get to an objective answer that doesn't exist because it will always be a matter of subjective preference. I agree with Brad that they're like the consistency piece is a problem. Like why can I cut my boobs off when I'm, in high school, but I can't go into a bar and have a drink or play slots at the casino until I'm 21? It makes absolutely no sense. 18 is an imperfect number, but it is the one that we traditionally have is like, this is when you have learned the information that you need to know to go out into the world and to get a job and to start to live your own life. But any number is going to be imperfect. If you say it's 21, that's going to be imperfect too. Some people are going to say that's too old. Some people are going to say it's too young. When we say it's 25, you're going to say, well, that's the age where we know the brain is fully developed and the logic reason function is there. But to be honest, in some people, the brain develops earlier. In other people, the brain develops later. It's like a happy medium. So there is not going to be an objective answer. And I don't understand why she's really harping on that, to be honest. It's a matter of opinion.
But maybe you want that one to be right.
Yeah.
Where do you get your account of the human person to decide what it means to pass into maturity?
I think what we're talking about when we talk about a legal age of adulthood is your ability to fully understand what's going around you, your brain development, your ability to informed consent to something, right? And I don't have a great way of drawing the line that's not kind of arbitrary, but you do have to draw it somewhere.
I will allow Mr. Knowles the obvious.
Yeah, well, I don't think that one's view has to be arbitrary on this matter. I don't think my view is arbitrary. I just don't think transgenderism is true.
Well, we're talking about age.
That is arbitrary, Michael. That is arbitrary.
For all of human history, pretty much no one has thought
Absolutely
the
arbitrary.
transgender idea really is true. And you don't seem to think that it really is true. It's interesting.
Well, I think I view it different. I have a different definition of it.
But here's the inconsistency that I find in your point. You say that when you turn 18, you ought to be able to chop yourself up and put on a dress and go into a women's bathroom, and putting aside the public issues that come from that. I just wonder how it is the case that transgenderism is false for the first 18 years and then suddenly becomes true when one turns 18. And if that is not what's really happening, if it is...
Would you allow them to go die in a war, Michael? Because in my book, if someone can go and die in a war under our current system, then that person has the right to pretty much do whatever the F they want. And Michael Knowles continuing to harp on like what's good for the collective, what's good for society. That's a collectivist ideology. It is quite literally the same ideology that the socialists espouse when we watch them on Socialism Saturdays. It's exactly the same. Why are we embracing in a so-called conservative that is supposed to believe in individualism in some realm? Why are we espousing a collectivist ideology while claiming to be a conservative?
False, and your trepidation in exposing children to this is because it obviously is false. If it's false and harmful for children, why is it beneficial and true for adults? Shouldn't we apply an even standard across the board and come to a conclusion?
So you often set this up as a dichotomy, but I think that it either has to be true for all or false for all. I think it's a false dichotomy. I think the issue is children cannot fully consent to the full consequences of a life-altering medical procedure. We're not even talking about social transition. I think if you have a persistent gender dysphoric 13-year-old and you want to have them socially transition, I think that's
another
up to parents.
Great point from Ellie.
Ellie gets a gold star yesterday about parental rights. I'm fine with that.
But not parental wrongs.
You should have the right, with only very, very high exceptions in extreme cases, to parent your kids rightly or wrongly. And it's not badly or well, except for extreme cases of abuse.
So I'd actually like you to draw that out for a second here, because I think the thing that we can all agree on in this room is that parents make life-altering decisions for and with their kids outside the question of gender. Mr. Knowles' choice to raise his children Catholic sets a mark on them that, they may diverge, but
some might say that's brainwashing kids. Some might say that religion is brainwashing kids.
You can convert, you can't undo a lot of the medical transition things. It can permanently sterilize you for life.
So that's what I'm asking about a little. How are you thinking about what a parent can and cannot consent to on behalf of their child?
I think the same way a parent cannot consent to sex on behalf of their child. There's obviously a level of physical maturity you have to reach before you can make potentially life-altering decisions about your body. And so something like raising your kids Catholic, well, if your kid grows up and wants to become Jewish or an atheist, they can't undo a bottom surgery, right? Not really. So that's why I draw that distinction. And I would just say, to Michael's point, that it either has to be true for everyone or false for everyone. First off, we're talking about the government as an arbiter of truth or not, but also we can have different standards for kids and adults. You can't get a tattoo as a child. You can't drink. You can't buy a gun. You can't go into our movie. You can have different.
You can take hormones if your parents were you're too short as a child. And I'm curious whether you think that's something parents should consent to. Doctors will give you growth hormones if you're projected to be short enough that they worry it will impact your quality of life.
Yeah, I think there's a very different
and it's permanent. It's not undoable.
Between that,
the child
and, for
can
example,
kind of only guess so much what it's like.
Precocious
to be an adult.
puberty, right? Sometimes you'll have a rare case where a 7-year-old will start going through puberty.
So I want to unpack the difference between these two. Precocious puberty is slowing down something that will happen. Right. Choosing to give your child growth hormones is triggering a permanent change that cannot be undone. Do you think parents should be able to consult to growth hormones on behalf of their child when they're told their child will be very short? It's a choice parents make across the country.
I would say if there's not going to be like life-altering harm and consequences for it, yes. But I mean, the difference is like if you go through gender transition as a minor and never go through your natal sex as puberty, you often lose fertility for life. That's not quite the same thing as being a few inches taller or not.
Interestingly, the pitch is often, in some sense, about preserving future fertility insofar as the doctor worries being too short will inhibit your ability to find a spouse.
Well, that's a whole other issue.
All right. Mr. Knowles, I want to ask you the question that you aren't going to get asked by Mr. Palumbo because you're debating him rather than Ms. McCloskey. People report, and you disagree, that they have a different anthropology than you. They don't agree with your description of the soul. And what they say is, I see my child, I see them light up when they...
This is where I like having nice interactions with my chat. And when we have conservatives mucking things up by calling people who think it's okay for people to be trans the same as murderers and rapists, this mucks things up where we can't have nice conversations. Ellie says, and making a lot of good points today, Ellie, they would say Christianity is brainwashing, but I'm going to baptize my infant child and I don't want that taken away. And I don't want to take away anyone else's right to live their life. That's exactly right. I personally, if I had a kid, would not raise my child with any sort of religion at all. Now, if they wanted to personally explore religion, if they wanted to attend church here or there, like if they wanted to, adopt a religion as an adult, that is their business. But I mean, I wasn't raised with religion, and that was actually a very purposeful decision on the part of my parents. And my father is an atheist. My mother is an agnostic, but both of them were raised Catholic. Both of them went to Catholic school, had the nuns rapping them on the knuckles and everything. And they made the very conscious choice to not raise my brother and I with any religion. They never said positive things about it. They never said negative things about it. Every once in a while, we had to go to a church to go to like a baptism of like a cousin or something like that. But that was really the extent of it. Now, as I got older, I started exploring different religions. I spent a lot of time studying Buddhism. I even, believe it or not, did explore Christianity for a brief moment. And I found the spiritual belief system that works best for me, that makes sense to me, that uplifts my life. But that doesn't mean that's going to be the same for everyone. And so if I want to protect my right to do what I want, and if I had a kid, to raise my kid the way I want it, I have to protect Ellie's right to say, you know what? I do want to baptize my child. I want my child to be raised Christian. Well, it's not the choice I would make. I don't think it's good, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work for Ellie. It doesn't mean it doesn't work for her family. And I think that we really need to get to this place where we have some sort of acknowledgement that different people are different, man. Different people have different values. They like different things. They show up in the world differently. And if you want to be able to live your life the way you want to live it, then you have to proactively protect other people's rights to live their life the way they want to live it. We don't need to agree. We can still be in the same space. It's all good. I want to shout out to Amazon Eve. Thank you for the super chat. Thanks for bringing this topic up. You know, man, someone's got to do it, I guess. But I do feel very strongly about this. I feel like the backlash that I've seen in the conservative space to trans people is really, quite frankly, deeply and profoundly disturbing to me. To see them say we need to eradicate this entirely, to watch them completely dehumanize all trans people because they've made different choices about their lives, it's so authoritarian. And it's just gross, and it's dark, and I don't like it. And it doesn't feel any different than the left.
Get to dress in the way they want. I see them, feel more comfortable. Even aside from those longer term questions, how can I as a parent be so sure when you tell me that when I see my child feel more comfortable, they're wrong and I'm wrong, when in anything else, if they signed up for Little League and it really fit for them, I would go with it, I would explore it. And your answer here is not. So how do you answer that sense of a parent's sense of their own child and that particular child's response to a transgender, feeling?
I think this point by the phantom of Professor McCloskey is a very good one, because it would seem to me that what transgenderism is proposing is an anthropology. It's an idea about what human nature is. And so if it is true, then it is true for children. And I'm not using this to suggest we get rid of transing the kids. Ultimately, I think that, of course. But if it's true, then it would seem to me very cruel to prevent a child from transitioning, especially before puberty. Because if you can suppress a child's puberty, and then you can put them on cross-sex hormones, and then you can have the little boy look more like a little girl, he is going to much more successfully pass as the opposite sex than if he were to be put on these kinds of hormones and have these procedures much later. It would be much more expensive, it would be much more painful. And so if transgenderism is true, then I think we have to trans the kids. Now, it so happens that transgenderism is not true. And there are people who are in all various states of anxiety and depression and suicidality even, who have fallen into this confusion of transgenderism later on. And so just as I think it would be wrong to lead children who are behaving in an irrational way down this path, I think it would be quite wrong to do that to adults as well. Mr. Palumbo has conceded the point that at the extremes of anorexia, it would be fine to force feed somebody or force somebody into hospitalization. Mr. Palumbo has made the point that someone suffering body identity disorder would not be able to get this sort of a surgery to remove a limb. What doctor in his right mind would do it? I will point out there are doctors today removing the healthy breasts of 14-year-old girls. So I think you can find a lot of quacks out there. In fact, there have been quacks who have performed this surgery, but none of us, I think, believes that we ought to chop off the healthy limbs of these very mentally ill people. So I just don't see why we wouldn't apply that down the line. Professor McCloskey's position is a consistent position. And
if someone is anorexic and they are refusing to eat, and it gets to the point where they are wasting away into nothing, they are going to die. If someone is trans and they are an adult and they hopefully have been to therapy and have thought a lot about it and they're sure and they want to have gender transition surgery, that gender transition surgery, beyond the normal risk of complication that exists with any surgery, there is always a risk that if you undergo surgery that you're not going to make it out alive, okay? But beyond a relatively normal risk related to the surgery, if someone has trans surgery, they're not going to die. Now, they may at a later date regret what they did, but guess what? People get tattoos that they regret. People have plastic surgery that they regret. Like, people do things to themselves that they may later come to regret. However, they are not going to die. That is the difference between getting someone who is anorexic that is refusing to eat the mental health help and support that they need to be able to get to a place where they can put food in their body so they don't die, and restricting someone from getting elective gender transition surgery that is probably not going to kill them.
And it's consistently wrong. And I think that if we're going to be right here, we have to be consistently right. To Brad's point that he keeps saying, why would you want the government to do this? Why would you trust the government? I've said it before, I suppose I'll say it again. In the United States, we are the government. Even with all the corruption, we are the government. And if we surrender our capacity for reason and moral conscience, if we really say that we can't know the difference between true and false and right and wrong, then we're surrendering self-government. This is what John Adams meant when he said the Constitution's built for a moral and religious people. That wasn't soft soap and a nice platitude. He's saying that's how self-government works. If we surrender that, we lose the American project.
Mr. Palumbo, I do want to ask you the same question. What would you say to a parent who says, I want to take care of my child, everything I see in my child's behavior, not just in what they tell me, but in the way they act when I address them in one way or the other, when I put them with one group of kids or the other, tells me they're happier this way and uncomfortable the other, but you say I can't do this till they're 18. Why?
Well, to clarify, I'm okay with them socially transitioning.
But I think you know that that's not always where people want to stop.
I agree.
Right? So what would you say to that parent?
The reason that is not appropriate is that child is too young to really consent to the life-altering possibilities of that, but two, going through puberty of your natal sex.
What's going on?
We okay?
Some people were transitioning to the front rows, and so I think the security got a little worried about that.
Okay. I'll just start over.
So again, I'd like to ask the question again, because I think the reason the noises are so loud out there and the reason everyone got quiet when we saw someone moving is that people think the stakes of this question are high.
They are.
And that parents worry if they listen to you, Mr. Palumbo, and wait and act later, they may not be taking care of their child or loving their child as they are. And it sounds like you're all right with them doing that later, but not earlier. And I think that's a big burden of proof for that question.
I understand completely, and that's why I think this is a really complicated issue.
What I learned from reading the emergency rule in the state of Missouri restricting transgender surgery is there is research to say that if kids go through the puberty of their biological sex, they are going to be more likely to embrace their biological sex and desist from believing that they're trans. That to me is a pretty good reason to go through the biological puberty of your sex. And I say that understanding that there will be trans people who go through the quote unquote wrong puberty that medically transition later, but there are an awful lot of trans people in the world who transition as adults after they've already gone through their biological puberty. And though it might be inconvenient, and I understand that, I think that the inconvenience of everyone going through that biological puberty to make sure that they just aren't gay or just effeminate or whatever is actually like the greater good for the greatest number of individuals, because a lot of people who think they're trans when they're younger, or whose parents convince them that they're trans because they have Munchausen's by proxy, those ideas are going to go away once the child goes through their biological puberty, and then they're going to discover, oh, I'm gay. Okay, well, nothing wrong with that. Live your best life. But for people who do still persist in saying, like, no, I'm not the biological sex, well, guess what? You can still medically transition. And don't we want people to be sure? Don't we want people to, before they start cutting off body parts and making themselves sterile, don't we want them to be absolutely sure? People transition as adults all the time, and they go on to live perfectly happy lives transitioning as adults.
I don't envy a parent who has a child with severe gender dysphoria. I can see why they would be incredibly torn on what the right thing to do is. But what I will say is that it's actually the process of going through puberty as your natal sex that often causes gender incongruity to desist. So the problem is that now
exactly, Brad, you got there.
Cross-sex hormones, they never actually go. That's why previously, decades ago, when you had gender incongruent youth, many of them grew up to be gay men or lesbian women. And that was because when they went through their puberty, they reconciled their gender. They realized the things they were feeling didn't mean they were actually
Is there
trapped
a
in the
point
wrong
after a
body.
certain trial of puberty where you'd feel comfortable with a minor transitioning when they say, I've given it a good shot, Mr. Palumbo? Like you said, this works for some people. It doesn't work for me.
That's why it's so hard to have the government come in and set a one-size-fits-all rule. I have also said that, I think the age of consent should be 18, but in some states it's 16 or 17. It would make sense to me then that in those states you could also transition gender at 16 or 17. But I don't know exactly where to draw the line. And that's part of my point here, is that Michael keeps saying transgenderism is false. And if it is false, it should be banned. I don't believe the government should be in the business of banning false ideas. Michael's also said that transgenderism is a false religion. So then we want to ban religions. I'm wondering what happened to freedom of religion? What happened to freedom of speech? And also, the average federal bureaucrat has the politics of Elizabeth Warren. And I know you can cite noble things about self-government, but the truth is we have a bloated bureaucracy that does not represent the American people. It is an entrenched political class with politics much different than yours. So the idea that we're going to make that government the arbiter of what ideas are true and false and ban or eradicate some ideas as a result of that seems to me not just a bad idea on principle, but incredibly short-sighted for people from your background and worldview and values.
Mr. Knowles, how do you think you would fare under a government that has the reach and intimacy that you are advocating for?
I think I would fare fairly well, because while I agree with Brad's point that we have far too many bureaucrats on the federal payroll, the recent upending of laws concerning sex and gender have come from elected and appointed officials. It's come from the Supreme Court, appointed by presidents. It's come from legislators in Charlotte, North Carolina, and all over the country. So it has been from representatives of the people and appointed officials who've been appointed by representatives of the people, and the people change their minds. That's one of the features of democracy. And so, unfortunately, the Supreme Court in 1973 decided that there were some imaginary right to abortion, and this error persisted for a long time. And then 49 years later, the court reversed that decision. In 2020, the Supreme Court made an error and decided to interpret civil rights law protections for sex as being protections for sexual orientation and gender identity, which ironically undermines civil rights protections for sex by allowing the men to play on the sports teams and go to the bathrooms. And so in this case, I know, Brad, you keep suggesting that I want this very narrow authoritarian totalitarian view. I don't. There are all sorts of questions where I'm happy to leave things pretty open, but on certain issues where only one side can establish its principle in society, we have to come to conclusions. And I would come to the conclusion that has prevailed for all of human history, not the one that cropped up 5 seconds ago.
So I want to push a little on what pressing on these questions and these distinctions means for kind of the stability of our democracy.
Yep.
Because it's one thing when losing power means, losing a little bit of ground on some parts of your agenda. The tax rates are set differently, more or fewer oil wells are drilled.
I mean, Michael Knowles really
laws kind of seesaw wildly.
Michael Knowles really does sound like a socialist. I'm not joking when I say that. We watch socialism on this channel more than real socialism more than almost like any other YouTube channel. Michael Knowles is sounding like a socialist. He's like, well, it has to be us or them. We can't coexist together and have different opinions. It's either us or it's them. And so it's going to be us. And we're going to do everything we can do to gain the power we need to make it us. That's quite literally how the socialists talk, guys. I mean, they care about different issues, but that is the basic gist of what they want. Michael Knowles is not correct when he says that it's either going to be us or them. And if that's really the position that he wants to take, then the only conclusion that we can draw is that Michael Knowles wants an authoritarian government that will legislate his religious view of the world and force everyone else to live by the standard blessed by Knowles and not their own standard, because they have their own belief systems, they have their own values, they're, different people are different. Don't tell me you're not an authoritarian when you are demanding that people live by how you see the world. As long as people aren't hurting each other physically with physical violence, words are not violence. As long as they're not physically hurting you, assaulting you, doing something else they shouldn't to your physical body, or stealing, breaking your stuff, your property, then people should be able to do whatever they want to do. Leave them alone. It's really not that hard. And anyone telling you that there is no universe in which we can't live and let live and leave other people alone when they're doing things that we don't approve of is unauthoritarian. And they should not be trusted with power. They should not be trusted with decision-making ability, because Michael Knowles is quite literally saying, I want to rule you.
Between administrations.
Yep.
We have the kind of the gag rule on abortion. It's one example of a law that just gets flipped on and off every time the administration changes, and it feels like more and more laws are in that all or nothing executive order thing. It seems to me that makes every election feel apocalyptic.
Yes.
We get more of the flight.
Guess what? They feel the same for you. They feel exactly the same way for you.
Right? If people feel losing an election means losing ground possibly permanently, it doesn't seem we can live alongside each other at all. We've already lost faith in democracy, kind of regardless of where we draw the line when we're in power.
This is such an important point. And the reason that you've seen this kind of radical polarization where now we go topsy-turvy every election is every election that we're able to win, for that matter. Sometimes the Democrats rule for a long time. The reason for that is because we no longer have shared norms and standards. And so the very thing that I am arguing is a solution to this problem. The reason that our norms and standards have broken down is because half a century ago, leftist activists decided to upend our standards and norms in our culture, to say that having any standards or norms at all would be authoritarian and anti-American. And so what happened was the left pushed their radical new standards. In the 1950s, the 1940s, you could read the Bible in schools. You could not read pornography in schools. Today, you cannot read the Bible in schools. You can, and in some cases, are.
The United States has a First Amendment, Michael, and that First Amendment precludes a state religion. The reason that you can't read the Bible in public school is because public schools are apparatus of the state, and we don't want them promoting your religion. If you want to teach your kids the Bible, read the Bible at home. Take your kids to church. But there are some families, and mine was one of them, that did not want religion forced on their children through the public schools. And I'm better for it, man, because I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Catholic, and those ideologies wouldn't have worked for me at all. And I may have never discovered the one that did had I had the Bible read to me in school. That is state-sponsored religious indoctrination, Michael. That's why it's not in school. This is why conservatives cannot be trusted with political power. This is exactly what they'll do with it. They are telling you what they'll do with it. The same thing happened with Moms for Liberty. You guys know how I'm completely against all this book banning bullshit that's happened in the schools? Well, one of the things that happened when all these moms were going in where they started with, we just want to get pornography out of schools. That's where they started. And then after they tried to make that argument, the next thing they did is, well, we now think that we want the Bible in schools. That's where Moms for Liberty went with the book banning bullshit. It wasn't enough just to say, maybe we don't have sex in the books in the schools. Wasn't enough. They had to follow up with, well, now that we've got some extra room on the bookshelf, let's just get some Bibles in school and have the kids reading that. This is why conservatives are no better than leftists. They do exactly the same thing. They just do it with their values rather than the other ones.
Are assigned to read pornography in schools. It's not a battle of more freedom or less freedom. It's a battle of what standards are we going to have, what taboos are we
Your
going to have.
Bible in school is not freedom,
especially
Michael.
in the 60s, is the left knocked down all of the old standards. They insisted upon their standards in their place, and the conservatives lost the ability to even speak about standards, to even speak about the good, the true, and the beautiful, the common good, what's true and false. And as a result, the left has totally upended things. But I think if we can reassert a sensible vision, then things will go less topsy-turvy.
I'm going to indulge my nerdery for 1 second, then pose a last question to you two, then we'll take questions from the audience. Mr. Knowles, do you really think this is a question of the left pushing or more of what Alistair McIntyre describes as just the losing, for many people, including conservatives, of a sense of where order comes from till we don't have a language to speak together? Not one side putting forward new norms, but all sides nearly losing touch with what gives rise to their norms that they learned kind of habitually from their community without learning them from the roots up.
Well,
because I think you're blaming just one side here, and I don't know that I believe you on that.
No, I blame both of those things, but I think one is a consequence of the other. If not entirely a consequence, largely a consequence. Why are people not in touch with the basis of order and truth? Might it have something to do with the fact that left-wing activists booted the Bible out of schools? Why is it that people don't have a solid formation about the grounding of our government and our public life? Might it have something to do with the fact that a judge decided that preachers can no longer speak about political things, that religion now has to be merely a private matter for the inner closet of your own consciousness rather than a matter of public life?
I'm sorry. Don't you guys have churches where you can congregate and talk about religion? Michael Knowles is like, the only place that people can have religion is in the far corner of their brain, in the closet with the door closed under a blanket. That's the only place that they're allowed to think about religion and God. That's not true, Michael. That's not true. You all have churches, you all have communities, you can all have all the religious Bible studies you want in the privacy of your own home, where you are not using my taxpayer money to fund your fantasy. I don't mind you having your fantasy. I don't mind you worshiping whatever God you want to. I don't mind you memorizing every single page of the Bible. It doesn't impact my life at all. I don't mind you living your personal life by whatever values you want to live. I don't mind that you're not trans. I don't mind that you and your wife are never going to have an abortion. Like, that's your right to live your life the way you want to and reject all of this leftist bullshit in your own private life. You can go to church 5-6 times a day for all I care. It makes no difference to me. If you want to buy Bibles for all of your friends for Christmas, hey man, more power to you. It's your money. Spend it any way you want. But I don't want my taxpayer dollars funding your fantasy, because I don't believe your books are real, Michael. I don't believe the Bible is the way, the truth, and the light. I don't believe that. It has nice stories. It has good moral lessons. Okay, fine. But I find other books to be far more compelling than I find yours. And I have the right to my freedom of religion, to believe what I want to believe and not to be interfered on by you. And guess what, Michael? I will make you a deal. I will never ask for your tax dollars to fund my religious beliefs or my spiritual beliefs. I will never ask you to pay for an ayahuasca ceremony. I will never ask you to fund a shaman. I will never ask you to pay for me to travel to Egypt to go to the mystery schools. I will never ask you to do those things. I am perfectly fine paying for all of that myself, okay? But stop trying to use our taxpayer dollars to fund your religion and pushing your religion into public life, because we don't all support your Christian, conservative, Catholic, whatever belief system. What works for you doesn't work for everyone. That is why you're not allowed to push your religion through the public dollar on the collective. I don't know why this is so hard to understand. I really, really don't.
To me, these are not separate questions. And I point to the left because they have been so conscious and intentional about this kind of a strategy, and because feckless conservatives bought on with the logic. There's a line from William F. Buckley Jr., who's very important to this organization, that I always come back to from God and Man at Yale. And he was quoting a liberal, actually, who said it. And he said, "Skepticism has utility only when it leads to conviction. It's nice to have a big open society, but sometimes people's minds are so open that their brains fall out. A poem is beautiful because of its limits and its constraints. We are limited beings. And so we can't be all things to all people, because then we're not anything to anyone."
Can I just hop
Yes,
in
you
and
may.
say
I gave
something?
him a bit of time there, yes.
Yeah. So you say that you want the truth, the freedom to speak the truth and the good and the beautiful and everything else. But at the same time, I mean, you'd toss up and rip up the First Amendment to stop drag queens from reading books to kids.
The First Amendment doesn't protect that.
It does.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't. The First
It
Amendment from the
absolutely does.
beginning
What
of
are
our
you
country
talking about?
has not protected whole scores of speech. Obscenity, notably, in
It
this
is
case.
not obscene if it's so. First of all, you could ban all sexual performances, drag or not, from having minors.
I cannot believe that Michael Knowles, with a straight face, just said that the First Amendment does not protect a drag queen reading a book to a child at an event that no one is compelled to go to. You don't have to bring your kids to Drag Queen Story Hour. If you don't want your kids to listen to a drag queen reading a book, you don't have to go. But to say that's not free speech, are you kidding me? I don't believe it should be in school. I don't believe it should be in public school at all, because then it would be compelled. But no one's compelling their parents to bring their kids to a drag queen story hour. Nick Incognito, he's arguing collective rights over individual rights. Michael Knowles is a collectivist. I'm really just glad we've got all this cleared up. He's absolutely collectivist. He talks exactly like the socialists. He might have different values than the socialists, but the structure of the arguments, exactly the same as the socialists, 100%. Good morning, Stephen. Good to see you, my friend.
And I would support that. But to have a fully closed...
So you'll shred the First Amendment?
No, that is obscenity. There's a very clear standard of what obscenity is. And a fully clothed person, who is simply dressed in the attire of the other gender and wearing makeup, reading books to children, is protected by the First Amendment.
Brad, for much of our country's history, cross-dressing was illegal throughout the
We
country,
had the
including
Alien
in San
Sedition
Francisco.
Acts. We had slavery.
Michael Knowles wants to outlaw cross-dressing now. Michael, would you like to outlaw men wearing kilts? Are kilts allowed? Are you going to outlaw all Scottish men from entering the United States if they have a kilt in their suitcase? Unbelievable.
Because we didn't always live up to
we
the
still
values.
are part of the Alien Sedition Acts.
But they're not enforced. But so I'm saying just because we had things in the past doesn't mean they're actually consistent with our rights and values.
I suppose what you're saying, though, Brad, is, Michael, your view is anti-American, and it's not consistent with the First Amendment. And what I'm pointing to is the people who wrote the First Amendment, the people who ratified the First Amendment, the people who lived in a country under the First Amendment for the vast majority of our country's history, they all agreed with me. And people in very recent times
What
have
about
started
robes,
to
Michael?
pervert the meaning of the First Amendment to
Are
kind
men
of
allowed
agree
to
with
wear
you.
The people who wrote the First Amendment also wrote the Alien and Seditions Act.
So now you're
clearly
saying
they
the
didn't
First
practice
Amendment's
what
no
they
good.
preach.
Sure.
But the text of the Constitution and the principles outlined are what's important, not the imperfections of the people that drafted them.
About where you see those principles and what they lead to. Because I think there are two ways to interpret what we want out of free speech, and I know which side Mr. Jones stands on, so he's not getting the questions. One is that free speech, open discourse is a good in and of itself, possibly to avoid coercion or too large a government that would be needed to suppress speech. But the other view, which is the view I know Mr. Knowles holds, so he's not going to need to respond to this one, is that the reason we want freedom of speech is to arrive at truth in the same way that we want peer review in scientific journals, not so that there's ultimately a panoply of voices.
No, I disagree, because there are a lot of truths that are subjective that we are never going to agree on what the truth actually is. The purpose of freedom of speech is not to arrive at truth. The purpose of freedom of speech is that expression is a gift that we have all been given purely by virtue of existing. And how we express ourselves leads to how much we value ourselves. If our expression is stifled, then we are going to be more likely to not value ourselves, not to love ourselves, not to see that we have anything to contribute to the world. But if we are allowed to express ourselves unencumbered through fear of the federal government, then we're going to be able to lead more happy and more productive lives. And it always comes back to who decides what truth is. If you want to use freedom of speech to be able to arrive at what you believe the objective truth is, more power to you, man. You're free to do it. But in my perception is that we have freedom of speech because we are protecting an innate gift that we have all been given by sheer virtue of being born. That's why you have free speech. Not because everything that everyone says is going to be true. Not because everything that everyone says is going to be correct. Not because everything that everyone says is going to be nice or pleasant or make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. We have freedom of speech because expression is a gift from God that we have all been granted by sheer virtue of being born. That's why.
But so that by hearing everyone out, we wind up with one voice speaking one thing that is true. And I'm curious, for you, Mr. Palumbo, do you see the point of free speech as an end in itself, a protection from coercion, or as a tool to slowly, gravitate towards one thing that is true, and free speech is a tool
what is
that
true
gets
for
us
you
there,
is
but
not
the
true
good
for
we
me.
are pursuing.
So
we have many disagreements about what is true. You are allowed to believe what you think is true, but just because you believe something is true does not mean that everyone else would objectively come to the same standard. What you are expressing, Studio Owl, is that you have a fixed, closed, inflexible mindset that is not capable of processing subjective arguments. I suggest you work on that, but you're also allowed to not work on that. You are allowed to live your entire life with a mindset that is quite literally incapable of processing that other people see the world differently. You have the freedom to do that, if that's what you want. But to say that truth is objective is not correct.
Definitely reject the utilitarian view of free speech. Is that now? I think to some extent both can coexist. In that, I think the best idea.
I'm sorry, I don't allow authoritarians on my channel. Go fuck yourself right off.
Disinfectant, but there is utility in and of itself of letting man be free to say wrong and false things.
And
that
tell
is
me
the
about
kind of
what
society.
Tell me about what you like about that, because you projected one version of it. So what is the good you see in doing that?
That's the most fundamental aspect of what if you're not free to speak, you're not free to think, right? That is one of the most fundamental things about humanity. Is
I'm going to press one more time just because for the interest of time, I'm going to do it more briefly than I know Mr. Knowles would. What is the good of being free to think?
to
Seriously?
explore and find the best ideas in part, but also to fulfill the human experience. That's what life
Oh my
is
God.
learning and making your way through the world and deciding what you believe. And if you're not free to think and you're not free to speak, you're not able to do that. So it's like the idea of, for example, coerced morality isn't really morality, right? Because if people are doing the right thing or believing that, for
I don't
example,
like
like
her as a
everyone's
moderator.
very loyal.
I can
to,
tell what her
Kim
opinions
Jong-un
are.
in North Korea. But there's not actually much value in that loyalty because it's done at the threat of death.
Lot of value for Kim Jong-un.
All right, at this point,
Would you say?
But and you would like to be Kim Jong-un.
Do you? I don't think I would.
On
wouldn't
narrow issues
look
Yes,
as good in the
Brad,
States. I don't think
yes.
I have more questions, but since I am not Kim Jong-un, I will not be a tyrant and use the time for questions. I want to look a little at the eyes because we have a...
Yes, you are correct. This can absolutely happen. That can absolutely happen. And if that 50-year-old man says anything inappropriate, he could probably find himself in a boat ton of trouble, not necessarily from the federal government because he's allowed to say whatever he wants. Remember, words are not violence. I mean, are you a leftist? Do you believe words are violence? But might that 50-year-old man find himself getting punched in the face by the father? Yeah, he might. But is he allowed to say that? Yes, he is. Words are not violence. Keep your kids away from strangers. That might be a better tactic. But to say that he's not allowed to do that because you don't like his speech, the only speech that needs to be protected is speech that people like you don't like. My God. I truly, this is, yes, it is actually legal for it to happen. It is. This is just patently incorrect. You are fucking retarded. I'm going to go ahead and say it. These are retarded, unserious answers. Like, I just don't know. Like, I truly, listen. For the amount that I had to hear in 2020 of wear the big tent, individual liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of everything. We just want to protect people's freedom of speech, freedom of thought, big tent, big tent, big tent from conservatives and from the MAGA movement. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me how many of them truly do not understand what freedom of speech actually is. All right, you're getting blocked. Goodbye. Freedom of speech does not have limits. I'm sorry. It doesn't. Words are not violence. If you believe that words are violence, then you are a leftist. If you believe that the federal government should be able to lock people in a cage for saying words that offend your fragile sensibilities, then you are a leftist. If you are trying to get people canceled on the internet for saying words that offend your fragile sensibilities, then you are a leftist. I do not understand why this is so hard to process in the minds of conservatives. People are allowed to say things. And by the way, I don't understand why it's so hard to process in the minds of leftists either. Because leftists and conservatives believe exactly the same thing in this regard. Both leftists and conservatives believe that the federal government should punish you and lock you in a cage or cancel or proactively cancel you from being able to exist in society based on saying words that you don't personally approve of or like. They're exactly the same. I do not get it. I really don't. If someone can explain it to me, like this is a serious ask. If someone can explain to me why in God's name conservatives can't wrap their head around this. And I'm harping on conservatives, not just that I think they're absolutely retarded on this point, but because they were the ones. I remember 2020 when they were like, we believe in freedom of speech and freedom of thought, and we are the ones that are going to embrace a diverse set of ideas in a big tent and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So the reason I'm harder on conservatives on this is because But 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they were singing a much different tune than they're singing today. The left has been trying to censor speech for a really long effing time. But this is a change on the conservative right, where a couple years ago they were saying one thing and now they're saying a completely different thing. So what changed, conservatives? When did you go retarded? That's really what I want to know. When did you go retarded? And what happened to make you go retarded? And that's not to be of any offense to anyone with neurodivergence or any of that. I'm using it in the classic, this is batshit fucking stupid sense. I know people with Down syndrome that are smarter than conservatives who truly believe that they should be able to lock people in a cage for saying words they don't like. This is not a knock on people with developmental disabilities or any of those things. This is, yeah, exactly. This is you have just said the most batshit stupid thing that I have literally heard all day, and I just have no other word that I can use because I am a child of the late 80s and the 90s. I have no other word that comes to mind to be able to articulate just how batshit stupid this is.
Mike over in the corner, is the plan for Bill to approach the mic? Just to check, since it's just tucked in the corner. I want to remind people that the best way of asking your question is to have it formed very clearly in your mind before you step up, to give other people the best chance of also asking theirs. Questions should be 3 to 5 sentences, brief to the point, because I want as many voices to be heard here as possible. So, questions from the body.
Hey, thanks for coming, guys. I've been a fan of both of you for a long time, mostly Brad, though.
Hey, there's one. We got one.
The reason I'm a libertarian is because government is inherently a monopoly on violence that will always further accumulate more wealth and power no matter what you do. So having said that, my question is for Michael. As the size of government has grown, so has the acceptance of alternative or degenerate lifestyles on a systemic scale. Culture and the legal system reflect this. How can you recognize this fact while believing that simply using the state to fight this behavior in the legal system will lead to the necessary cultural change to eradicate it from public life?
Well, the government hasn't just grown. I guess that's the misconception at the heart of this. Yes, obviously, we're a much bigger country now, 330 million people. The federal government is much more powerful than it was some 200 years ago. But in other ways, the government has weakened. In other ways, the ability of local governments to control their own communities and set standards, that's weakened considerably. The ability of school boards to set curricula now is quite controversial. The rights of states have completely gone away. The states essentially have no real power anymore if they ever disagree with the federal government. So once again, I don't think this is an issue just of government getting really big or government getting really small. Conservatives have never supported small government. It's not possible for a country of 330 million people with a global empire to have a small government. What we can have is a limited government. So we want government to be within its natural and proper limits. And so when we're talking about the limits of the government, especially in a self-government such as ours, we have this question: do we have the political right to set certain standards? Are our rights merely the individual licenses to pursue whatever delusional and depraved sexual identities that we want to pursue, or any other kind of fantastical ideas? Or do we have an exalted freedom that will suppress some of our lower appetites, but will give us a flourishing community? That latter idea was the idea that has animated our country, that made our country great, that made our whole civilization great. As we've lost that, the government's gotten all out of whack, as you described, and the country's gone to pot.
That was an admirably concise question. I'd ask you both to kind of imitate questioners in consistency.
That was a less admirably concise answer.
A little bit. Just to get as many as possible. We'll go to the next one. I'll throw a dichotomy as we go. America is too large to be justly governed, yes or no?
America is not too large to be justly governed. There have been plenty of empires that have been justly governed.
Dichotomy.
Well, I'd suggest we should maybe be doing a little bit less of the worldwide empire part.
Fair enough.
Sure.
But also,
sure.
I would say it is
True.
too large to be governed by one large federal government, and that's why It should be decentralized as much as possible.
Next question from the students.
Thank you guys both for coming. As an aspiring journalist, political content creator, you guys have been keeping me busy over the last couple of weeks. I appreciate that. I'm a senior at Point Park University. It's probably about 15 minutes from here. The school made headlines last year for their implemented pronoun mandate, saying that if students told you what their pronouns are and you didn't abide by that, that you can get in trouble through administration. It being a private university, how do you recommend not only fighting back against that rule, but having students who are mainly liberal on that campus?
Don't go to a private university that doesn't share your values. Now, I am not in favor of compelled pronouns. I'm not. I believe that we should be offering people basic respect and courtesy because it's the right thing to do. I'm not in favor of rules or policies or laws that dictate speech. I just believe that people who deliberately and quite frankly maliciously purposefully use someone's incorrect pronouns to own the libs, I just think they're really shitty people. I think they're really shitty people who deserve to be treated with the same righteous indignation with which they treat everyone else. Because the vast majority of conservatives who are doing this are not actually doing it because they're coming from a principled place. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it to own the libs. They're doing it to be shitty human beings. They're doing it to try to get one over on someone who they perceive to be their political enemy. I use the pronouns that people ask for because I believe in basic respect and courtesy, not because I have to. I can say whatever the fuck I want. I think we've made that clear today. But because I believe in basic respect and courtesy. And if I want you to call me by my proper name, which is Carlin, not Carolyn, not Caroline, not Karen, then I have to expect extend the same basic respect and courtesy to you. But what I would say to the student who's asking, what would you do at a private college that is implementing rules that I don't like? Go to a different college. If you are at a public school, they probably would have a much harder time implementing those rules because a public school is going to be beholden to a First Amendment. A private college that is run by liberals is not going to be beholden to the First Amendment. So if you don't like it, go to a different school. That might not be convenient. But again, if you want your private places where you can establish your own rules out of the reach of the federal government to be able to dictate to you what your policies and rules must be, then you need to respect the rights of other people to do the same thing. And if you yourself make the choice to go to a liberal private college, then you should expect that there are going to be liberal rules that you're going to have to follow because you made the choice to go there. If you don't want to follow them, then go to Hillsdale, man. Go to Liberty. Go to BYU. Pick a conservative college. I know there aren't many of them, but you do have some that you can select from. And if you don't like that, then go to a public school because they're going to have to abide by the Constitution, whereas private colleges do not. That might not be the answer you want, but that's the only answer that makes sense.
Let's kind of see your side of that argument.
The university is obviously very liberal, and so they probably buy into all sorts of student governance kind of silly policies. So you could try to get some power and wield it that way. But as you point out, it's a school. It has the right to set its own standards, especially as a private university. It can do that. And so ultimately, if you can't persuade the administration to do it, you might have to seek out a community that's more reasonable and that very likely will provide you with a better education if the school that you're attending doesn't know the difference between men and women.
Yeah, I think I agree with Michael. They're a private school. They can have stupid anti-free speech policies if they want, but I think you should transfer.
Oh yeah, for sure. My bad. Mr. Palumbo, it's awesome that you could come here on such short notice. How much did they pay you to do it?
A lot.
Sorry,
I can't get a dollar amount.
One question per participant.
Yeah, sorry, that's your question.
Leah, could I have a follow-up though? Could I have a follow-up?
Are you getting paid more than me? Because we have to talk about this afterward. This is.
I'll go. All right. Hi, I'd like to say thank you so much to Michael, for coming out. It's been a real pleasure hearing you speak. My question actually goes to both of you, though. So it's been, I know with you, Brad, you argued about with the age of 18, that's kind of the accepted limit of when someone becomes an adult. And then you said that's when they should be allowed to, go through gender reassignment surgery. My question is, at what age what age should we define as when one becomes an adult? And should it then be allowed to ban this type of surgery up until that age, or just ban it entirely?
Certainly, we can have an age to buy cigarettes, which they unfortunately raised recently. Now it's 21 to even buy a cigar. But, it could be 18 to do this, 21 to do that, or the other thing. But more importantly, even once one reaches those ages of maturity, the question is, can certain behaviors be banned? And the answer for all of American history, including today, is yes. Even if these are not issues that directly affect somebody else, yes, they can. Destructive, harmful behaviors can be outlawed. That's why we have laws against heroin and lots of other drugs.
We shouldn't have those
laws
laws either.
Suicide, still in most states in this country.
Shouldn't have that law either.
We have had laws and ordinances against the kind of transgender transition and surgery, because we can know something about reality. That's the premise of our government. And we can know that even adults sometimes fall into very destructive habits. And because we're all living together in society, if enough people fall into something like the addiction of heroin, then we won't have a true liberty in this country. We'll have merely licentiousness, which is really just a form of slavery. So we can.
Drug use tends to go down when you get rid of drug laws, because people are going to be more inclined to seek treatment, whereas prior they wouldn't have that available to them. So I am not in favor, just so everyone is clear, I don't think that drug laws should exist. What you put in your body is your business.
Can do that. We have done that for most of American history. And that remains
now
very
what
much
happens
still
to you
a possibility
is also your responsibility. So if you do heroin every single day and then your life goes to shit, well, you made that choice, but it wasn't the government's job to make that choice for you. You made that choice your damn self.
in America unless the libertines get their way.
Yeah, so I think the question is not so much can we or can we not restrict this. It's should we? And I would just say, do you want your own life restricted? Do you want government officials writing rules about what clothing you're allowed to wear? I mean, I think of it,
very
the
good
COVID
argument.
experiment reminded to me the importance of bodily autonomy and medical freedom. I don't understand how people can on one hand,
Exactly.
and I'm
Michael
assuming some of
doesn't
Michael's
believe that
positions here,
adults
but
are adults.
rail against COVID vaccine mandates, be outraged that the government would tell you you have to take an injection, and I was, but then also think the government should be able to tell you whether or not you can take testosterone pills. Be outraged at the idea of being forced to wear a mask, but think the government should be able to tell you you can't dress a certain way in public.
Oh,
To me,
this
there's
is such a good
total
argument.
Cognitive dissonance here. I want to live in an America where adults, as long as they're not hurting anybody else, can live their lives how they see fit. Michael apparently wants to live in a sort of majority rules type of you'll live your life the way the majority of people think you should America, which again isn't going to work out for a minoritarian social conservative faction in a country that's becoming more pro-LGBT, becoming less religious, becoming less traditionalist. It's just not going to work out well for you.
I want to get, we've had a lot.
That was such a good argument on the part of Brad to say that, Michael, if you get your way and society, the collective, if you will, because you're a collectivist, if you get your way and the collective gets to decide what the social standards are for society, you, Michael, are going to lose. And you're not going to lose by a little bit. You're going to lose by a factor of 70% to 30%. You are going to lose That is why we have to have live and let live, and you live your life the way you want, and I can live my life the way I want, and you don't get to dictate, and I don't get to dictate. That's the only way that works. Brad is really impressing me in this debate. I have to say, and I wasn't sure what to expect because I know Brad has gotten a little saucy about like some of the LPNH tweets, and he really didn't like some of them. He really didn't like that Happy Holidays tweet like at all, which I thought was amazing. But I have to say, like, I really do have newfound respect for Brad watching this debate. He is doing a great job.
Us. More questions from the crowd.
Oh, I have such good points
You
to
both,
make.
you both get concluding remarks.
That's true.
Yeah.
Guys, stand up. Hi, Michael Knowles.
Hello.
So thank you for persisting and coming to speak here despite multiple setbacks. As someone who is conservative and as a devout Catholic.
Oh, we got a conservative in the chat. It's a conservative. It's a boneheaded, retarded conservative. So you're 100% sure that you want to have minors getting transition surgery because that's what you just said. No, conservative. No, that's not actually what I said at all. Maybe in the mind of someone who isn't any more mentally developed than a retarded third grader, maybe that's what you heard. I'm sure that's what you did hear. You look to be what, about like 50 in your 50s, 50-year-old man? If you can't process what I just said and how it has no resemblance at all to what you're saying in this chat, then Rex, I've got some bad news for you. I do. Because the intelligence requirements on my channel to understand my content and to be able to engage with what I'm doing are you need to have an IQ of like at least a 100. It just doesn't work. And this is something I've learned from trial and error over the last couple of years. If you have an IQ of less than 100, you are not a good fit for my channel. You're just not. We're not going to be able to understand each other. You don't have the ability to wrap your head around the ideas that I'm going to be articulating. You aren't going to be able to understand Socialism Saturday. It's going to be so above your head, it's going to be ridiculous. Like, it just doesn't work. Now, you're going to fit in really, really great, Rex, at the Daily Wire. They're going to deliver you all of the content that you want with your IQ, what, around 75? Is that what we're talking about, Rex? Like, you're going to be able to fit in at the Daily Wire where they're going to give you all of your low IQ talking points that you just love to hear. They're going to repeat those talking points over and over and over and over and over again. You're gonna shell out cash for them, and they're gonna provide you with the service that you're paying for, which is they're gonna whisper sweet nothings in your ear every night. They're gonna read you your bedtime stories as you're going to sleep. But you're not going to fit in here. It's just not gonna work out. It's me, it's not you. I'm sure you're some sort of person that some people in your life really like you. I'm sure you're boycotting Budweiser right now because you've decided to give up Bud Light for a couple of weeks to prove how much you hate trans people and Dylan Mulvaney. But it's just not going to work out, Rex. I promise you. Like, we need to part ways at this point.
Who would like to eventually become a commentator for the Daily Wire, similar to your young colleague, Brett Cooper. Would you recommend I start posting YouTube videos about my commentary on YouTube, or gain traction to gain an audience and traction, or just email Ben Shapiro to ask him if I can have my own show, or how should I begin my career as a commentator?
I'm going to add an addendum to that question. Since I'm also Catholic, what prayer rule of life would you suggest for someone who's going to enter into media? I mean it.
The St. Michael prayer about 24 times a day. Really great question. If you're a friend of mine, I would not recommend emailing Ben Shapiro. That's not going to be the right move. What I would recommend for you is that you get a little bit of political experience. If you want to be a political commentator, I would recommend you get a little bit of political experience. You can work on a campaign. That's actually a great way to get political experience, to know what it's like on the ground and not just what the news says. I would recommend you read everything. The reason I recommend you read everything is because you're young, you're vibrant.
What did Daisy
and I'm sure
say?
You're very well educated, but your views will change as you become educated. And it's a real pity when people become well known at a young age and they say very stupid things and then they come to regret those things later on. So that's the first thing that I would recommend. As for the prayer life, I'm pretty simple about it. I would recommend a nightly rosary, and very simple. I mean, for people who are interested in the faith, I always think, oh, you could read Thomas Aquinas, you could read St. Augustine, you could read all these wonderful people, and I recommend G.K. Chesterton too, all these people. But pray the rosary, and the other thing I would recommend, I'm not even being cheeky here, is I would recommend praying the St. Michael prayer. It's against all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls.
And against our own temptations to wrath.
Yes. No, this, I hate to add another 30 seconds here, but the other night, it was during Lent, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about
No, actually, sorry, I can't allow this. Look at the hands, look at the hands.
All right. I'll suppress my wrath even more, I guess. All right.
All right, can we have another question from the audience? There we go.
Thank you. As I've been listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that I'm hearing that there's two different ideologies with each individual. Mr. Palumbo, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like more of a relativistic ideology. Mr. Knowles, it sounds more of this basis that there's a truth that is real and that everyone can discover. So that brings me to the question.
This one doesn't understand what being a libertarian means.
The thought that maybe the real question should be, what is truth? Otherwise, it seems like the conversation just keeps going back and forth.
There is no such thing as
without
objective
finding a
reality.
tangible outcome.
That is
Do you
the
think
truth.
this topic can be decided before answering the question, what is truth?
Mr. Palumbo, to you first.
Yeah, I think I'd push back on the idea that I'm like a relativist. I mean, that I don't believe every person, like, I hate the phrase like your truth, or I do think there is a truth. I think we're all imperfect and unable to perceive the perfect truth. And I guess what I'm arguing is not that there is no truth, but just that the idea of having society or the government top down decide what the truth is and impose it on all of us is antithetical to what I see as human discovery and flourishing, but also to the actual discovery of getting closer to the truth. Because when what is believed to be true is forced on people and different ideas, wrong ideas mostly, are suppressed, that actually leads to less discovery of getting closer to the ultimate truth. That's what we see. That's why things that were considered, complete conspiracy theories a year or two ago are now like, oh yeah, that probably happened. And so that's why I would say it's not that I don't believe there is a truth, it's that I believe that decentralizing truth seeking is the best approach to get us as imperfect beings closer to it.
And that is what we aim to do in this debate. We're nearing the end of our time. I want to give you time for your last roundup since I've cut you off and you've saved those all up for a rapid fire.
May I answer this question?
Go
though,
for
that was
it.
raised?
Sorry,
So I wonder, Brad, if you see the irony in insisting upon your view of society, which is the
He
view that says
doesn't.
we can't have standards and we can't use the government and society.
Michael Knowles is doing the ironclad law of woke projection right now. What Brad has said correctly is that people have different values, and what is going to work for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another person. And the government shouldn't be in the business of deciding what is right for everyone. And Michael Knowles is saying, well, Brad, you just don't believe in truth. Like, that's not correct, Michael. That's not correct. Sorry.
To impose rules, because my preferred society is the society in America that we've had pretty much for our nation's history, and it's the view that says that we can set standards and women can have bathrooms and we can just have norms and we can behave in a normal way. And what you're saying is, Michael, that's authoritarian, and so I, the great liberator, I am going to insist that none of you have those standards and those norms.
No, you can have those standards.
No,
that's not what he said, Michael.
Church, in your school, in your business.
Jesus
what you
fucking
can't
Christ.
do is tell the rest of the world how to live.
You just said I can have it in my community.
Yes.
Okay, so we can have it in my community, but not
As
in
in
someone
your-
else's
As
community.
in your
I don't- what does that
community
mean?
in terms of a private community setting.
There's no private community.
What
The
is your
community's public.
church? What is your church? Your church is a community.
But my community is
Collectivist.
Nashville, Tennessee.
All right,
My
well,
state
that's
is
your
Tennessee. My
city,
country
and I
is
don't think
America.
your city can
Well, Michael, if your community is Nashville, Tennessee, then your community is run by like an awful lot of leftists. So if you want the majority in your community to decide what the community standards are in Nashville, I think you're going to be really disappointed and regret the fact that you decided that the will of the collective should be like what rules your life.
declare one correct view of the truth for all its residents. I mean,
But
there's
it
plenty
does.
of
It has
countries you
laws.
could live in that do those kinds of things.
But all states are like that because all states have laws and they declare certain things true and others false, and some licit and some illicit. That's what statecraft is.
But that's typically done where the intersection of rights occurs, where one person's right to swing their fist ends where another person's face begins. Not when it comes to questions of individual beliefs being policed by
Like
the
who
state.
gets to go into a bathroom?
Well, who owns the bathroom? They can make the rule. You don't own the bathroom.
What about
I
the
don't own
government? What about the
bathroom.
military bathrooms and the school bathrooms?
The military, it can have its policies about.
That's the government. So what's the
Well,
government going to
obviously
say?
the government has to have its own policies.
No one has
but
to
that's quite
enroll in the
different than
military,
telling
Michael.
everybody.
I think I'll pause us here for a moment because I think you've exposed the fundamental rift here. I'm going to give my last question, then we'll have your closing thoughts so people can get home. It's a very short question.
See, now
Okay.
you know how it feels,
Just do
Leah.
it.
You see that?
Just do it.
Huh?
I'm not in a rush. Just
Well,
do it.
I would just like to know for your own later things that you can weave into your closing thoughts if you choose. There are a lot of people out here tonight who think, frankly, both of you are pretty seriously wrong on this issue. And even if you're right here, many of us have something where we later realize we've been wrong and we've harmed people as a result of being wrong. And I'm curious what you think is most helpful to you in realizing where you've been wrong on other issues. But you may give your closing thoughts, and that is merely a suggestion, not gavel enforced. But I think this is an issue like abortion where people think in good faith on both sides, the stakes are very high, and it's hard to be patient when you think lives are at risk. All right, you get to go
I'll
first.
answer your question as I walk to the lectern. Personal humility is helpful, and deference to the tradition is probably wise. But now I have to walk back to get my closing remarks, Leah. You can't fool me by having me only answer your question. All right. Wonderful night. Thank you so much to everybody. It's especially a wonderful night because on the precise topic of the debate, my opponent, Brad, seemed to concede a fair bit of it before we began, that the government should in some ways regulate
No, he
transgenderism.
actually didn't concede
This is
any of
great. My
that.
first opponent dropped out, so this is a great debate. This is my favorite one I've ever been part of. The law, as we have shown, must regulate transgenderism because transgenderism contradicts the understanding of man and woman long established in our law. Even the most tolerant society cannot simultaneously uphold mutually contradictory principles. Either women get their own bathrooms or they don't. Private enterprise can't solve the problem because the practical implications of transgenderism extend far beyond private business. The law cannot evade the question.
Ain't it the truth?
QED. Before we go, though, I would like to look a little bit further and ask
Seriously.
how the law should regulate transgenderism. We have two options. Embrace transgender anthropology, which is to deny the natural distinction between men and women, or to restore the understanding of sex that accords with reason and reality and which civilization has embraced for all of history. Not a tough choice to me. The law most basically is an ordinance of reason for the common good promulgated by the one who has care of the community. When law becomes unreasonable and untethered from reality, society flounders, as we see increasingly today. We will live according to some standard or another. The only question is whether we'll live in accordance with truth or falsehood. We will summon the confidence to assert the truth, which we can know through our reason and conscience, without which faculties self-government would be impossible, or we will shrug our shoulders like the cynic Pontius Pilate and ask that question we just heard, what is truth? We have seen the rotten fruit of cynical politics. As a citizen in a self-governing republic, I say we ought to live according to the truth, which sets us free and which offers the only path to a flourishing society for everyone. Thank you very much.
The debate we're having here tonight really fundamentally comes down to what kind of a society we want America to be. Do we want to be a pluralistic and classically liberal society where people of different beliefs and values can live side by side? Or do we want to fight in an ever intensifying struggle, a tug of war over the state, to be used to crush minority viewpoints and force conformity, force people to live how others see fit? I know which one I would like, and I would humbly suggest that the viewpoint of those conservatives, I would humbly suggest that the viewpoint of those conservatives who wish to regulate transgenderism out of existence is incompatible with that fundamental view of America as a place where each person can chart their own way in life as long as they're not hurting anybody else. I also would just reiterate that it's remarkably short-sighted. 30% of America identifies as socially conservative. If you guys really don't want to leave space for different lifestyles, for unpopular viewpoints, that is not going to go well in a democratic society.
Yes.
So if this newfound flavor of authoritarian style conservatism gets its wishes, it won't just be betraying some of the principles that make America great. It will be setting the stage for its own destruction. And frankly, that destruction will be deserved.
Absolutely, Brad. God, Brad was so on point in this debate. Honestly, I don't think that Brad said anything that I disagreed with in the entire debate. And Pagan Libertarian is bringing up a very good point too. Michael Knowles saying there is no private community has basically the same energy as socialists saying there is no private property. It's almost like Michael Knowles is no different than socialists. But no, Brad Palumbo clearly wins this debate so far as I'm concerned. And it's like, not even close. Michael Knowles showed his full authoritarian colors. He displayed them for all of us to see. And I just don't want to hear ever again a conservative say, we just believe in small government and individual liberties, because they do not believe in small government and individual liberties. And if you are a conservative, or you fancy yourself as a conservative, and you genuinely believe that, small government and individual liberties are the way to go, I might humbly offer that you're not a conservative in today's conservative movement. You are a libertarian who has convinced yourself that aligning with the political right is going to lead to you getting smaller government and more individual liberties. But I hate to break the news to you that it will not. There may have been a time, many moons ago, when conservatives truly cared about individual liberties and making smaller government. That may very well have been true. But that is not true in our current reality. And I promise you, if you continue to align with conservatives and vote with conservatives because you truly have convinced yourself that they are the lesser of two evils, I think you're going to be really disappointed if by some miracle they ever actually get into power, because Brad is absolutely correct that conservatives do not have the majority. But if they manage to get themselves some power, what you're going to find is that what they are going to do is expand government and make it a point to legislate their religious values and force them on everyone else. Conservatives are not the lesser of two evils. They're just evil, in the same way that the left is evil. When people try to force you to do something that you do not want to do through the power of the state, that is evil. That is slavery. That is people saying that they have the right to make decisions about your life. And if you really do have more libertarian sensibilities, where you do just want smaller government and lower taxes and more freedom of speech for everyone, then your only option is to either vote for libertarian candidates or, quite frankly, not vote at all. And I'm fully on board with the not voting at all strategy. As of right now, I'm not planning on voting for anyone for president in 2024. I'm sure maybe Robert F. Kennedy could convince me. I don't know enough about him yet. But as of right now, there is no way in this universe I'm voting for a Democrat. But guess what? There's also no way in this universe I'm voting for a Republican. I downright refuse to vote for the lesser of two evils anymore. If someone doesn't earn my vote by fully embracing a worldview in which they are going to reduce the power of government and protect my right to say whatever I want and not try to force me to do anything I don't want to do, if someone isn't going to reach that what I think is a pretty low effing standard for getting my vote, then I'm not going to vote for them. And if a Democrat wins, then a Democrat wins. And if a Republican wins, well, I guess that's not really any different than the Democrat winning anyway. People have got to stop voting for horrible candidates because they convince themselves that they are the lesser of two evils, because they are not. They're just evil. That's all I really have to say about that. That's all I really have to say. But the win goes to Brad so far as I'm concerned. And that's our show for today, guys. So if you appreciated the show, I hope you will consider mounting that like button on the way out the door. And I want to say, too, I was a little hard and maybe some might argue a little cranky about conservatives today. But the problem is I posted some anti-abortion stuff lately because I was really perturbed about that socialist reproductive justice conference that I went to. And so I've been posting some anti-abortion stuff lately. And what's happened is I've had a new flood of pro-lifers come into my feed. And I loathe pro-lifers almost as much as I loathe people who are pro-abortion. Again, two sides of the same coin. So I had to shake the tree a little bit. And I knew it going into it. And I worked out some aggression. But I had to shake the tree a little bit because on my show, on my show, we cough directly into the microphone after 4 hours of streaming. On my show, I take on both sides. I am not beholden to either side. If your tribe is engaging in bullshit, I will call you out on that bullshit. And if you are not willing to hear inconvenient truths, then I'm just not the right channel for you, man. But if you appreciate what I'm offering, if you appreciate my rants, if you appreciate the good dressing down that I give the authoritarians that come into my chat, then you're welcome to stay, man. And please make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, carlin.substack.com. And if you would like updates and show notes about the shows that I will be doing, including my next stream tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, make sure you're subscribed to The Cult, which is the cult.substack.com. And what will happen is at some point tomorrow, you will get an email that says, look, here's what I'm going to talk about on the show today. And here are my links. And here's where you can watch it and stuff like that. So that you know going into it what I'm going to be focusing on and what I'm going to talk about. So you can decide whether or not to spend some time with me. If I'm not talking about stuff that interests you, you can go somewhere else. But if I am talking about stuff that interests you, you can find it there. And another bonus of subscribing to The Cult is that if I ever need to get in touch with you, like if I get a strike on my YouTube channel or something and they won't let me stream, then I can still email you and tell you where to watch the stream. Isn't that great? James Jones says, if I never get called out, how will I learn? Well, I can't remember the last time I called you out on my channel, James Jones. But guys, that's all I have for today. It's almost 9 o'clock. I haven't really eaten today. I'm going to go make a burrito. Does anyone want a burrito? I'm going to make like a burrito with some nice seasoned pork because I really like ground pork that I'm going to like fry up, and I'm going to put some really nice seasoning in it. And then I'm going to do some yellow rice because I love a good yellow rice, man. And then I'm going to do the piece de resistance, the habanero cheese from Cabot Creamery in Vermont, because Cabot Creamery has the best effing cheese. I don't care what you have bad to say about Vermont. You go into a Cabot cheese store and you get to sample all the different cheeses, and you get some hot habanero cheese, because the habanero cheese is the best. I'm gonna put a whole mess of that habanero cheese on my burrito, and it's gonna be glorious. I'm gonna sit my ass down on the couch. I'm gonna watch Top Chef like I'm a real cook. I'm going to critique the food as though I actually know what I'm talking about. And I'm going to have a great old night. I hope you guys have got some good plans for the night. We will see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Take care, guys. Have a good one. And we'll see you soon. Bye.